What made somebody automatically qualify for world's biggest D-bag? I was at an Apple service provider waiting for an iPod Nano replacement when this guy who was talking to another Apple employee started threatening her. He was furious because she wouldn't replace his iPad. She was extremely and unbelievably patient and repeatedly tried to explain to him that the store was just an authorized service provider and not an Apple store, and that they'd need approval from Apple's regional office to replace his iPad. He asked for a piece of paper, scrawled his Twitter handle on it, and repeatedly told the girl to check it to see how many followers he had. "You'll be surprised," he said, "and I'll be tweeting about this. Show your manager and maybe they'll change their mind." He also said his number of followers will put a dent on Apple and that he'll never buy an Apple product again. He also repeatedly threw his iPhone down onto the counter to demonstrate that he couldn't break it. He was still at it when I left. Nuts. And the kicker? I jotted down the Twitter handle that he gave the girl and looked at it when I got home. It was owned by some Canadian hockey player with like 200,000 plus followers who was in another part of the world and who looked nothing like the guy at the store. I mean, at least he didn't say I'm a big deal on this website called Reddit. I worked at a local Cold Stone when I was a kid. This shop was owned by a family who had kids in my high school, so I was pretty close with the owners. On a particularly busy afternoon, I was whipping up someone's ice cream when I overhear things getting heated at the cash register. One of our owners, Lynn, was working there, and an upset woman was complaining about the price of her order. Lynn broke down each item and how much tax was, to which the customer responded that she deserved a discount, and if she didn't get one that she'd be calling her good friends who owned the establishment. Lynn calmly said, "I'm Lynn, and I own this establishment. Please leave." I've never seen someone turn red so fast. Bartending once, I picked up a table so that a server could go home early, and the guests at the table were really rude to me. They wouldn't call me by my name, they just kept calling me different racial slurs against white people, even though I'm Mexican. I smiled and gave them great service, but it was clear they were trying to get something for free. When they asked for my manager, I couldn't hear what they were telling him, but the people seated at the end of the bar near their table spoke up and told my manager they were lying. We ended up calling the police when they refused to pay their tab, which was over $100. They ended up paying it, and then my manager comped $10 off so that I could get a tip. I tried to buy the nice couple at the bar around, and my manager comped that too. This makes me think that stores should hire people to stand around in plain clothes and berate D-bags when the opportunity shows itself. Although this does seem like it would be both peak entertainment and contribute to a massive rise in staff morale, I don't see many retailers going for it, both based on the expense and the fact that most of them bend over backwards to accommodate even the worst possible customers. I used to work at the local grocery store during high school as a bagger and cashier. One day, a man walked in with a coupon for $2 off a $6 chicken. After explaining to him that the coupon was expired and that I couldn't accept it, he calmly says, "Oh really? Well, I'll get it anyway." A couple of hours later, one of my coworkers came running in yelling that everyone's tires were flat. We reviewed the surveillance footage, which showed him walk outside, throw the chicken into the air, and freak the frick out and start slashing everyone's tires. He ended up having to pay for all the damages and was no longer allowed near any of the employees. Are you serious? For $2? What the frick is wrong with people? "I know the owner, and I will get you fired." "My dad's the owner, and he warned me you're a butthole. Now go away." Huh, I had a similar one only last weekend. I was just about to start work at a nightclub, so it must have been getting on for midnight. I'm stood at the side of the bar talking things over with a girl called Becca, who's out of sight in the office. Becca was about to open the upstairs bar for me when this drunken girl shoves her way up to me and exclaims, "Get the manager for me now." I took a second to assess the situation because this girl looks a little out of place in the club. She's clearly been drinking heavily and could be in some sort of trouble. I place my water on the bar, and I start to ask her if something has happened when she butts in with, "It's 12 o'clock and you haven't opened upstairs yet. You're stood here chatting up barmaids and you're ruining my night." Okay, I think to myself out loud. By my watch, it's 11:55 and I'm heading upstairs now, so if you can bear with me for… And I'm cut off again. "Don't you know who I am? My uncle is the owner and you are out of a fricking job." I couldn't help but grin at this last statement. "See her?" I say to the drunk girl as Becca emerges from the office. "Her father owns the place. And you two don't look very related now, do you?" This drunk girl, clearly outraged by this point, decides to just take a swing at me. Like, what? Becca responds by wrenching the girl's arm behind her back, jabbing her keys into the girl's side, and running the now squealing drunk girl out the front door and onto the cold, wet pavement. Turns out the drunk girl was one of Becca's little sister's friends who was out celebrating her 18th birthday and thought she could get special treatment if she dropped the owner's name every 5 minutes. They'd already let her in the club for free, you see. This morning I found out she ended up getting banned from half the clubs in the city centre for 4 weeks. Instant karma. I used to work in retail a few years back. Had some guy come in that tried to return everything that was far outside the return policy, over a year, and he was outraged when he was informed we couldn't return it for him. He started off slowly, saying what an outrage it was. Then he continued saying how everyone he was dealing with was incompetent. He eventually got so upset that his antics weren't working that he said he was going to bring a few of his weapons in and pointed at people saying, "I'm gonna shoot you, and you, and you." Needless to say, the police were called. 6 cop cars were waiting for him outside when his rant was finally over. When I was 18, I worked at Toys R Us, and a lot of people thought that it was a fun job because we're surrounded by toys. People get crazy about their fricking toys and games for their brat kids, but one kid always stands out. I was working the customer service desk, which entailed returns, checkouts, and answering phones. One day I was working the desk and there was a long line of people. Everyone was being very patient with me answering phones and helping everyone check out, but this one guy had an attitude right away. He kept mumbling about how horribly rude I was and that I wasn't working fast enough. He bought his crap and walked away. I thought that was over, but he quickly came back into the store and cut the line. He started telling me to find him a pair of scissors so he could open his purchase. I calmly explained that I didn't have a pair of scissors, and I really didn't, by the way. He then proceeded to come around the desk, physically push me out of the way, and started opening all of the drawers. My manager witnessed the whole thing and came over and told him to get out of the frickin' store. The guy then screamed at my manager to call the police and see if he cared. We didn't have to call the police because there was an off-duty one in line, and he quickly explained to the man that he was being detained until the police arrived. That quickly shut the guy the F up, and he was subsequently arrested for disorderly conduct and harassment. Enjoy your frickin' toys, you butthole. I am a retail manager, which the narrator is assuming is a misspelling of manager. My store has a really crappy price match policy. There's a few things we won't match. One of these is that you need to use a loyalty card to get the deal. I had an older gentleman come in to price match 5 bottles of Pepsi. We sold them for $1.50 and a competitor sold them for $1. We couldn't price match because the competitor deal needed their loyalty card. And this is where it went from 0 to crazy in 3 seconds. The guy grabbed one of the bottles, starts to open it and says, "Well, if you won't match it, I guess I have to pour this pop over your register. What are you going to do then?" Followed with a smirk. I kept my cool, didn't miss a beat, and stated, "Okay, I'm going to have to call the cops then." He got super upset and couldn't understand why I'd call the cops for him, and I tried to explain that he just threatened to vandalize the store's property. After he understood, he walked out. All over $2.50. Anytime anyone says, "Don't you know who I am?" Ugh. Ah yes, the statement that guarantees the utterer a place in hell. It's been a while since I've seen that one, honestly. Annoying to know that there are a few people still out of touch enough to realize that it's more effective than a badge saying D-bag in signifying the amount of respect they should pay you. I didn't do anything about it, but this was my favorite. I have small accessories that I sell for one of our product lines. One of them costs $20, and shipping and handling via the mail was $4. Perfectly reasonable. Then this guy went off the rails because I wouldn't give him any deal. We have no margins on that kind of stuff, so I'm most certainly not going to cut any big deals. He threatened he'd post his sordid tale on all of the popular forums that pertained to the industry. I pretty much told him to go ahead, and I didn't think much about it. I came back in after the weekend, the guy went ahead and posted a bunch of new threads on all of the major forums and emailed me all of the links. I checked them all, and the forum community members pretty much all told him to stop being such a moron. I felt pretty smug about that. I once worked at a little gaming store next to a big retailer. I don't get any commission or anything, just helped kids pick out games or whatever. I sell the odd Xbox here or there. So some guy comes in asking me to match a retailer's deal on a Nintendo DS. For whatever management reason, I couldn't do it. He starts to get ticked off and there's nothing I can do. My hands are tied. So he leaves. I think nothing of it, and then he walks past about 15 minutes later and screams from the door, "I got it from this big retail store for whatever price, and I'm never coming back, you C-word." I was a 15-year-old girl. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work in parking garages, so I see all kinds of overreactions. I had an elderly woman once refuse to pay the $39 for parking. I don't set the prices, shoot someone else. I went down willing to cut her some slack and charge her the validated rate at $20 if she'd let me keep a copy of her receipt. I no sooner rounded the corner than the old lady rushed over to me screaming with a terrified child next to her, ranting about how, "My father fought in the war and what you're doing to me isn't right." She went on to compare what I was doing to what the Germans did in World War II, and that if she wasn't allowed to leave the garage for free, that she'd stay in the garage and starve herself. I, of course, did what any young and aspiring manager would do, and I laughed at her. And then she spit on me. I also once had a guy who claimed to be an FBI agent threaten to have me deported while I was speaking to him over the intercom. I went down to speak to him in person, and being that I'm not from another country, his deportation threat had been taken away. The guy went on an absolutely bat-crap crazy rant about how foreigners were taking over the country and how the fat cat corporations were making all of the money while normal men lost their jobs. I asked him to see his badge, to which he gave me all kinds of bullcrap about not carrying when he's out of state. He then got out of the car and called the local police department, who came down, to which he made no mention of being an FBI agent. The cops informed him that he would indeed need to pay his bill before exiting, and that he was on the hook for the $39. In all cases, I go into these situations looking to give someone a break. I understand that after a day in the mall with your family, you sometimes forget to get your ticket validated. Most garage managers have the ability to overwrite the fee on your ticket, and if they say they aren't, they're lying to you. If you're nice to us, more often than not, we'll cut you a break. Giving us food also helps. In 2012, I told a client that he really needed to update his copies of Office 97 to the current version, if you can even call that an upgrade. I gave him a whole list of reasons why, including that Microsoft stopped releasing security updates for that version quite a while back. He flipped out and demanded that I call Microsoft and tell them that they needed to keep releasing security updates for Office 97. When I told him it didn't exactly work that way, he said, "Well, you just tell them who I am and make sure that they know that if they don't fix this, I'll never buy another version of Office again." Just wow. I used to work at a sandwich shop, and my old boss was notoriously aggressive. To customers. He'd fight for his employees tooth and nail. One time, some irate idiot had something he wanted to discuss with my boss, and being in a rare accommodating mood, my boss said, "Just give me a moment to help this line of customers, and then you'll have my complete attention." This guy, not knowing how lucky he was, pressed his luck. After enduring another onslaught of verbal attacks, my boss handed the guy his card and said to call him later. On the back of the card, he had written, "Below me." I worked at a cafe about 2 years ago. We had an espresso ready to go, but no one knew who it belonged to. I decided to roam around the cafe with said espresso and asked any waiting customers if they'd ordered this coffee. So, after a few polite replies of, "Oh, no, sorry," I get to one business-looking man sitting with the owner of the fruit shop across the way. The owner had a bad reputation at my cafe as being a sleazebag, according to the girls. So I asked the businessman, "Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, mate, but did you order an espresso?" The businessman looked at me and said, "No." So I began to walk away, and as I did, he says, "Oi, it's pronounced sir." I turned around and said, "Pardon me?" not understanding what the heck he was on about. He then stares at me with unblinking eyes and says, "When you," points finger, "talk to me, you call me sir. Got it?" After a few seconds of bewilderment on my part, I utter, "Okay then," and proceed to continue finding the espresso's owner. It was incredibly embarrassing. Called out in a busy cafe when trying to do my job, it made me feel 2 feet tall. Joke's on him as I made sure his coffee was bitter, just like his heart. As someone who was a waitress for a very long time and also worked in retail, I can't beg people enough to say something when you see a customer acting like a total D-bag to an employee. The employee can't do anything without risking his or her job, but you have the power to put jerks like this in their place, and the employee will most likely be forever grateful. Also, real-life karma. While I agree that it's probably the right thing to do, I'd say that it's one heck of a gamble for the person doing it. Either you're correct and it really is just some coward who gets a kick out of screaming at teens and service people and who backs down immediately, or you get one of the genuine tire-slashing psychopaths mentioned here already, and you're immediately in over your head. That said, you have my admiration if you do stand up to these jerks. While working as a manager at a movie theater, I had someone call in because our online ticketing system was broken. We were just a little independent, so the large fees from sites like Fandango didn't work for us, and we had our own that worked okay. As stated, it was down and I was in the process of fixing it, but it would take some time. I tell the gentleman that he can always come into the box office and buy the tickets and save himself $1 doing so. This, of course, is incredibly insulting somehow. He lives 30 minutes away and he's worth $200 an hour, and he wants us to fix the site now. It continues for some time, but the third time he decided to mention his salary, I elected to have the call drop and the phone lines go down for a little while. I have two stories. First, one was just about a perfectly healthy 65-year-old who decided to deprive a mother and her severely mentally handicapped child from parking in a handicap space. He went on to just scoff and walk away when she called him out on it. No justice was done, sadly. But I used to have this other woman come into my work all the time who was just some withered-up old trophy wife with a superiority complex and a Mercedes. We have a curbside service for takeout at my job, and every frickin' Friday night, the absolute busiest day of the week at any restaurant, especially at mine where takeout usually does something close to $2 to $3 grand on busy nights, she used to park in the dedicated curbside spots and dine in for nearly 2 hours. Needless to say, I've had numerous complaints from people who mean to use that spot appropriately, but we can't do anything because anytime a manager politely reminds her to stop parking there, she goes on about being a paying customer who has the right to park wherever she wants. Blah, blah, blah. Management at my work will avoid confrontation with guests whenever possible. Even I'd run into her several times and reminded her myself, but one night she parks halfway in a handicap space and screams at me to mind your own fricking business, kid. So yeah, I called security. Enjoy your $400 ticket, C-word. Nearly got a chub watching her turn over that little envelope. She doesn't come to my work anymore, and everything seems a little brighter because of it. I worked at DirecTV in the cancellations department, a grocery store for nearly 6 years, and I'm currently front desk monkey at a hospital. I've nearly mastered that awful specimen known as the irate customer. In large crowds, I find it important to set up and get right in the problem if they're picking on a quieter employee who won't defend themselves. DirecTV taught me to let them vent and let it all out, and the grocery store taught me my judging eyes. Eyes that seem to say, you just yelled at a 19-year-old because everyone bought the hot dogs you wanted before the 4th of July instead of the hour before the party like you did. You just stare at them, let them fester in their awkward silence, because what are you supposed to do? Call Nathan's Hot Dogs and order a special air flight package? At the grocery store, I had a lady screaming about how long the line was, and so as she waited for me to do something, at the top of my lungs I asked, would anyone like to satisfy this woman by letting her get in front of them? It was an honest question, albeit phrased awkwardly. But no one piped up, and there she was. I asked everyone in line if they'd lend their generosity, and not one voice chimed in. I could write a book on the crap I've dealt with in my tender young job history. I used to be a manager at a pizza shop, and we had a customer that would order the same pizza the same way 3 times a week, and always call back to complain about it. He'd always complain about the crust being too thick, but he didn't like the thin crust, and nothing we ever tried was good enough for him. We had given him a bunch of free pizzas and discounts and whatnot up to this point, trying to retain him as a customer, but he called back in a rage one night when I was the only manager there. It went a little something like this. I need to speak to a manager. I am a manager, sir. What can I do for you tonight? You're a manager? Yes, sir. No fricking wonder. I order pizza from this overpriced crap hole multiple times a week, and you always screw it up. The crust is always too thick, and you just aren't smart enough to figure out how to fix it. Yeah, sir, I'm aware of the situation. If our pizza really isn't to your liking, maybe you should consider trying something else. Or maybe you should be fired because you're absolutely freaking terrible at your job. I don't even know why they let women out of the house, and you're allowed to be a goddamn manager? You're a worthless B-word, and you can't even make a pizza right. Maybe you should go home and let men do the work. You'd probably make a better working girl than anything else. I then proceeded to very calmly tell him we'd no longer be accepting his business, and literally told him to F off. I called my general manager to let him know, They congratulated me for it and told me he wished he could have done it himself. In short, an angry customer told me he thought I'd make a better brothel employee than a pizza shop manager. I told him to screw himself, and I was praised by my manager for it. I spent the past couple of days on a Greyhound that was going across the country, Canada, and we pulled into Quebec. The security guard spoke fluent English. I overheard a cell phone conversation, but he seemed to be a massive D-bag. People who asked him if he spoke English usually did so in French, and he responded with yes and helped them out. Then a little Asian girl who couldn't have been more than 15 came up and asked him if he spoke English. When I chatted with her later, I found out her English was pretty raw as she moved to Canada from Taiwan about 3 years ago. The security guard said no English repeatedly, and she looked distressed. She'd asked a few others, but no one had really responded, and he looked like the only person working at the terminal at that moment. The ticket counters were closed and no janitors or anything like that were around. She went around asking others, but the people who responded didn't know the answers she was looking for. She promptly started crying. I went over and helped her as best I could. When the security guy walked past, he simply laughed at her and called a friend on his phone where he spoke nothing but flawless English. Non-Americans. What is the most shocking thing you saw when visiting the United States? I'm Canadian, and I went on a brief road trip to the States about a month ago. The most shocking thing I experienced was how cheap the food is. We went to McDonald's and a meal for 3 people only cost about $14, and one of the meals was a salad. In Canada, one meal costs about $8. I knew the food was cheap there, but damn. Woke up early on vacation in Florida, and the sidewalk outside my hotel was absolutely covered in lizards, and it was amazing. How hard it is to get a drink. I'm Irish and over 21, and in California, even with a passport and driver's license, I was treated with skepticism. Blood started to enter my alcohol stream a few times while I was there. Ugh. Rite Aid. I can get a flu shot, HIV test, a bottle of tequila, Snickers bars, and pizza pockets all from the same store. Awesome. IHOP. I can get an entire day's worth of calories in one meal. Also, having $1 notes made me feel like I was rich. I had a huge wad of notes, but like 20 of them were $1. But still, it's a nice feeling. Speaking as a European who's visited America, this final part of the story is absolutely true. It feels special to whip out a stack of notes and slap them on the table like a mob kingpin. The first time I had to deal with TSA was enlightening. Wanted to punch the prick. Now I know that's basically normal. I'm from Singapore, and we're pretty much a conservative and reserved society. I visited the US for an elective program at UCLA, Go Bruins, and the thing that struck me most about America was everyone's friendliness or socialness. People strike up a conversation with you, ask how your day's been, and really connect with each other based on what's happening around them. The weather, how long the wait for the bus is, etc. And somehow, these fleeting connections were very real and genuine to me. I came back home a much more enlightened person with my horizons very much broadened. So thank you, Americans, for showing me simple human kindness. You have to flipping drive everywhere. Again, as a person from a country with a compact built environment, this resonates with me. My cousin from Vietnam flew into America sometime in December, and she recalled that her first reaction was, "Wow, there's so much sugar covering the ground." It was snow, but she really thought we sprinkled sugar everywhere for sweets and giggles. Why she's never heard of snow, I don't know, but it was adorably hilarious. As an Australian who just came back from America this year, what the flip, man? You guys have pretzel M&Ms. Share that stuff around. Flip. I was told I speak very good English. I'm English. My neighbor Dmitri visit New York once. He say there was surprising lack of goats, which may not be bad thing. In the South, how in your face the religion was. Signs up on cafes, it being referred to a lot in conversation, and just everywhere I got confronted by religion. The patriotism as well, such as flags being up in so many yards. I had heard this, but I guess I didn't expect it to be so much like the stereotypes I imagined in my head. I found Americans insanely friendly as well, much more so than expected, and this applied to all places I went to other than New York City. I lived in China until 1999/grade 5 in elementary school, then our family moved to Dallas, Texas. Within the next year, the following things were very surprising to me. Everything is ridiculously big, from the size of our apartment to people's houses to the size of roads to the length of time it takes to get downtown. We lived in North Dallas near Arapahoe and Hillcrest. School classrooms resembled something like a wonderland. There were bright colors everywhere. Tables are put together into clumps instead of ordered in neat rows from back to front. Then there were stuffed papier-mâché animals on the walls with people's names on it. Cute little mailboxes for everyone, TVs and computers in every classroom, a cafeteria filled with tasty foods and snacks, and a playground with swings. We were learning 400 times 5 equals 2,000 in math class. The nice people at church actually took their religion seriously. Like, actually believed it to be real. I always thought religions were stories you learn because they were important cultural stories that had some education value, like the story of Prometheus giving fire to humans, for example. I was working at my uncle's restaurant in California when I saw a man at the bar who was looking pale and seemed to be out of it. His hands were clammy and he was not fully aware. I knew these were symptoms of a heart attack and he was unresponsive, so I called the ambulance. When the ambulance arrived, he seemed embarrassed by all of it. He did not want to go to the hospital. He asked what he would be charged for the ambulance. The paramedics then tried to convince him for about an hour to go to the hospital. He declined over and over again. I offered to drive him home, but he declined that too. This experience really hit home and made me feel for my neighbors in the United States. In Canada, people don't have to make a decision about something like this. The fact that people have to make health decisions and make their own diagnosis, prognostication, and take these kinds of risks made me really feel for people who are uninsured/uncovered. As someone who has had reconstructive labrum surgery, tonsil/adenoid removal, and several other emergency room experiences, I vowed to never complain about the medical service I receive in Canada, regardless of how long I have to wait. I got beat up real bad one time and someone called an ambulance. I tried to refuse, but they talked me into going with them to make sure I didn't have a concussion or internal bleeding. I even tried to talk them out of giving me an MRI or maybe CAT scan once I got there, since I didn't have insurance. The nurses said not to worry about that. Total bills were $7,004. Whole camps of homeless people living under highway overpasses in New Orleans. In New Orleans, those people are referred to as the middle class. I was in the M&M superstore in Times Square, and I saw a woman so fat, just so fat, she used a scooter. That's unfortunately not exceptionally unusual. I'm from Australia, and I couldn't believe how high the water levels are in your toilet. My berries nearly touched the water. Also, you drive through ATMs. Crazy. Yeah, when I went there, I suddenly realized why their toilets overflow when they get clogged. This is a very strange and alien thing to most of us outside the country. Perhaps someone can explain it. A homeless man in Seattle called me a good-for-nothing N-word, word for word. Keep in mind that at the time this happened, I was a 14-year-old white kid with a steadier job than he had. Homeless people are like ghosts in America. Nobody acknowledges them, we are frightened by them, and even sometimes amused. I was at a McDonald's in the US, and no one kicked my ass for wearing my futuristic computer glasses. Because it isn't like Paris. Tax. Why not put a flipping price sticker that includes it, so I don't have to work out if I have enough money for everything? Yes, this is so true. I've had to bust out the calculator in advance for nearly every major transaction. Wouldn't say it would be shocking, but just a tad startling. Basically, flags. Flags everywhere. On the pavements, in the windows, on the side of buildings, up poles, on cars, on doors, on posters, pretty much anything it could be stuck to. Oh, and the real comfy feeling of diners. Genuinely felt welcome in any I went for a cup of tea in. Always got a raised eyebrow and a question when I asked for hot tea instead of iced tea. I'm from Canada too, and I visited Anaheim. Portion sizes were gigantic. I swear they slaughtered 5 chickens for my girlfriend's dish at the Cheesecake Factory. The next morning's breakfast at the hotel was huge too. I felt like I was going to explode after. Also, corn syrup and everything. The ketchup and Coke were thick. Was definitely weird, and I wasn't a big fan of it. Seriously, if you're wondering why you have an obesity problem, this and the last point are part of it. I know obesity is a global issue, but fixing it starts at home. I was also surprised with how friendly and forward people were. Random strangers would talk to us, and staff were nice. Everyone spoke louder than back home too. This wasn't just at Disneyland, but also at small places on Newport. Speaking of Newport, we went to Balboa Island. Just off the island is a huge plastic surgery complex. That was interesting. Oh, and Americans take their schools seriously. Many houses on Balboa had university flags flying, and I saw a lot of UCLA and USC shirts. Oh, and girls breaking into song in the middle of the street? I found this confusing. I wasn't sure whether to find it endearing or cheesy. If anyone did that back home, people would think they're insane. But in America, I saw this multiple times. Holy car! I didn't expect that many responses to this. So to clear some things up that are getting repeated in the comments, I now understand that Canada also has HFCS in many foods. However, I did still find Coke and ketchup sweeter and more syrupy. That's what I meant by thicker. In regards to Cheesecake Factory, we ate there the day we arrived. There's not much choice in local food when you're on the Disneyland resort. Plus, my girlfriend's organization she volunteers for sends the people they help to cheesecake, so there was a bit of meaning to it. Oh, and in regard to schools, that's interesting that it's sports teams. I believe my school, the University of Alberta, has pretty good teams, but no one really cares unless they're directly affiliated with them. They seem more like clubs here, interesting to see the difference there. I'm also leaning towards good in regards to girls singing. Life could always be more like Hairspray. My first visit to America was Detroit. I haven't been back to America since. See, the problem is you went to Detroit. 90% of American citizens are too afraid to visit Detroit. Hey, lay off Detroit. Them people are living in Mad Max times. I was on the West Coast for about 2 months a couple of years ago. I'm from the Netherlands. Things that struck me. Portion sizes. Your small pizza is our large pizza. Your medium pizza is our family pizza. Your large pizza doesn't fit inside our borders. Clean streets. I saw a lot of $1,000 littering fine signs. Must have worked because there wasn't so much as a cigarette butt on the streets. Space. You have a lot of it. Everything is bigger, taller, larger, wider, and further apart. Food is cheaper than in Europe. Alcohol is more expensive. I figured out why you don't see a lot of American cars outside of America. I'll stop here before I insult people. I visited a Giants game in San Francisco and couldn't believe my eyes when Giants and Cardinals fans were sharing a couple of beers and eating hot dogs together while cheering for different teams. In Europe, we have to separate soccer fans from the moment they arrive in the game city until the second they leave, to stop them from bashing each other's heads in. Also, the entertainment value with all the songs and games is much higher than in European sports matches. TLDR, when you're from Europe and visit the USA, it's like somebody puts the contrast on your TV on maximum and turns the volume up. Rich people are richer, poor people are poorer, sweets are sweeter, laws are stricter, sports are more fun, everything is bigger, and man, do you guys build crappy cars. The amount of self-segregation that blacks and whites do in St. Louis, a city whose black-white population is basically 50-50. I almost never saw mixed-race groups of people socializing. It was either all black or all white. The two societies are almost separate. I have been here for 3 months on an internship. Things I have noticed. That whole patriotism and American ideal is dead in the youth. No one believes in the American dream anymore. Every young person I have met has said, yeah, this country kinda sucks, but what can you do? And I am in the South. Also the fact that it seems no one cooks. I prepare my own lunch and make my meals because it's cheaper and healthier. People seemed strange to know that as a 20-year-old male, I can cook and choose to. Also, the use of elevators. I have not seen people take the elevator down from the second floor so many times in my life. I'm sure this will all get buried, but the 1 or 2 of you who make it this far, high five! Speaking in terms of Americans I've met, I can say that I have met equal amounts of patriots and the disillusioned amongst the young and old alike. I thought fat people in Taiwan were fat, but then I saw Americans. Almost no Taiwanese are considered fat to me now. I spent a summer in Canada, but we went down to Chicago to go to Lollapalooza. On the way back, our bus had a stopover in Detroit. We left the bus terminal to get some food and passed by a taxi rank. One of the drivers asked, "You boys need a lift?" We politely declined, but he was eager as can be. "What do you want then? Wacky tobacco?" We explained that we were about to cross the border into Canada and didn't want any wacky tobacco, thanks. "White powder?" "No thanks, kind taxi man." Smack? I was shocked. Taxi drivers in Ireland are reluctant to even drive anywhere. American taxi drivers are significantly more helpful and seem to provide a much wider range of services. Other shocking things about America include the drinking age being 21. Quite how fat the people manage to get. That's not to say that all Americans are fat, just that those that are fat are really flipping fat. The existence of Four Loko. The people that hold rock and roll will kill your soul signs outside festivals. Heinz ketchup has different ingredients in America and is slightly less nice. It's really hard to narrow it down to one thing, so I'm not going to. The anti-child termination billboards, they horrified me, not in the way they intended. Along the same vein, people handing out anti-child termination propaganda outside a Nine Inch Nails concert. Only stuff I get handed at concerts here is for trashy clubs with their band-themed after-parties. The attitude of servers in restaurants. If someone messed up, the amount of apologies I would get, they were practically begging for my forgiveness, so I didn't leave them without a tip. It was awful. Religious shopping channel programs. There was a nun on TV trying to sell me a figurine of baby Jesus. I've never seen anything like it. US flags everywhere. So many. That level of continual patriotism seems almost redundant when you're smack bang in the middle of the country. Heck, I could easily keep going, but I'll leave it at that. Oh, one more. Americans call the main meal the entree. Mind-boggling. Brazilian here. Everything is so flipping cheap. From food to soda to cars and computers. Everything is a tenth of the flipping international price. And also, gas. When I was in America visiting my folks, the lady with nice hair on CNN was complaining about the gas prices, and I noticed something didn't seem right with the numbers, so I made a few conversions and started laughing. No one in the room got it. 1 liter of gas in America, $1.04. 1 liter of gas in Brazil, $3,017. I've never been to the US, but the most shocking thing I found out about America recently was that it's legal to not only carry a piece around with you for no reason at all, but to carry them openly as if you're flipping Rambo or something. I knew that many Americans own more ordnance than the military, but I just assumed they had to remain inside the house. For home protection, I hear all the time. I didn't realize you can just walk around armed to the teeth. Hey wife, going to McDonald's. Where's my ammunition? I'll come with you. Need to give my 45 a walk. Not trying to start another massive debate or anything, I'm just saying, to my perspective, that is absolutely crazy. In Australia, only the police carry weapons, and even then they are very, very rarely used. The police get in more trouble for shooting people than they would just letting them get away with crimes. Human life is considered very valuable, even criminals. And just to be clear, because the firearms are great, there are laws replies are already starting, please note that I'm not trying to offend or judge anybody. This is simply my perspective on something that is shocking to me about the United States, as asked by the OP. I'm from New Zealand, visited California a few years ago. While getting a haircut, the lady asked me where I was from. I said, New Zealand. She then proceeded to try guess what state I was in until I told her it was a country. She then refuses to believe that New Zealand is a country, no matter what I told her about my country. That amazed me. Another thing was the guy at the airport asking if we still hunt and eat the Maori. That was asked after he asked whether or not we had indoor plumbing in New Zealand. It was then that I realized most Americans I met were extremely narrow-minded and thought the world outside the US was an undeveloped place totally reliant on their great country. Most people were quite friendly, though. Most shocking thing I saw? Poverty. Absolute poverty. I visited the States 5 times, and each and every time it is impossible not to notice a huge problem with poverty. I'm Irish, so coming to the States I had a high enough standard on how a first world country should be, and it was as sad as it was shocking to notice how badly some people had it. Chicago. Well, I've been in Chicago quite a bit, with O'Hare being the main international airport for me, and it's not the worst, but some of the houses in which I've seen people come out of, and the number of homeless, has left me speechless. I've been in Chicago in the middle of winter, and that stuff is cold. I don't understand how people manage to survive. Washington and New York, they're about on the same level. In the center of these cities you can see the wealth, but venture outside them a little and the striking difference in living conditions is amazing. Just by looking like I had money, I've nearly been mugged twice. Los Angeles. LA was alright, except for the fact that if you get on the tram to venture from the city center out to Long Beach, you pass through some seriously trash-looking neighborhoods. It's scary, actually, that the population of Ireland lives in this small area, and they're so badly off compared to us. Also, lots of homeless, like lots. New Orleans. What the actual flip? I've never met nicer people in my life. Never. But what the actual flipping flip? How can you let people live like that? It's disgraceful. If you just walk outside the normal tourist area, you're into a place with high crime/violence, and you can see why. They have nothing. There's a massive gap between the rich and poor, and you seriously need to do something about it. The fact that America is built for cars and not for people. Excluding the original 13 colonies and some major cities, hello, New York and Boston, San Francisco and Chicago, the United States is built on a scale where the basic unit of measurement is not a human being, but a Ford F-150, at least. The streets are gargantuan, the endless sprawl of buildings is just mind-boggling, and when someone says, "It's only 15 minutes, they mean it's a 15-minute drive on the freeway, and not a 15-minute walk. Everything is car-centered, and without a car you ain't going nowhere. No wonder there is so much drunk driving. There is no other option for the people to get around. The exceptions are the cities that have a working rail-based public transport system. People here can get around like they do in the rest of the world. The scale of the place, the fact that everything is so insanely spread around, makes the entire urban area of the country seem incredibly empty, anonymous, unwelcoming, and just depressing at times. Showed someone who worked in a hotel in Mississippi my passport as a form of identification. She had never seen one before despite working in the hospital industry. I believe her exact words were, "Wow, you've got like a whole book there." Who is someone that we praise but was actually a horrible person? Chris Gardner, the man who Will Smith played in The Pursuit of Happiness, is considered to be an amazing success story, an inspiration, and a great father. He actually cheated on his wife with a dental student and got her pregnant. He then started dating said dental student and reportedly beat her. He was even taken in by police because of a domestic abuse charge. Dr. Seuss was having an affair with a woman while his wife had cancer. His wife killed herself because of it. Charles Dickens dumped his wife of 10 kids and 22 years for an 18-year-old mistress. When she called him out on it, he publicly called her a fat jackass. I'll just repost my answer to a question similar to this that was posted a while back. James Cameron. His movies are great, but he's such a butt. There's a reason why the crews to your movies are constantly revolting against you. He's been married 5 times. His marriage to Linda Hamilton ended after just 8 months because he was caught cheating with Susie Amis, who played Rose's granddaughter in the Titanic. He called agnosticism cowardly atheism. Orson Scott Card described him as selfish and cruel while working on the novelization to The Abyss. After working with Cameron on Titanic, Kate Winslet decided she would not work with him again unless she's earned a lot of money. She said that Cameron is a nightmare to work with. Studios have come to fear his habit of straying way over schedule and over budget. He is notorious on set for his uncompromising and dictatorial manner, as well as his flaming temper. Sam Worthington said Cameron would use a nail gun to nail the crew's cell phones to a wall in retaliation for unwanted ringing during production of Avatar. The first editor of The Terminator got fed up with Cameron and refused to edit the movie to Cameron's specifications. He did it so he could get fired. The crew that worked on Aliens walked off set. The entire crew. They eventually came back after a lengthy negotiation and an apology from Cameron for his conduct. Composer James Horner refused to work with him for 10 years after doing the score to Aliens. Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio still refuse to talk about their experience working with him on The Abyss. Some few things that are known is that Cameron ordered the actors to go to the bathroom in their diving suits to save time between takes, and every actor in the movie had major breakdowns at some point during the production of the movie. One of the few things that Harris has said is that he was driving home one day while shooting and spontaneously started crying, and he had to pull to the side of the road until he stopped. Mastrantonio has just said it was a horrible experience. The cast had to relieve their anger by completely destroying their dressing rooms, tossing couches and ripping the walls apart. Cameron has admitted that the only reason why he made the Titanic was to get the studio to finance his dive to the actual ship. He went to the studio, opened a book of Titanic paintings and said, "This ship, Romeo and Juliet." They greenlit the movie on the spot. His reputation is legendary in the business. During the 70th Golden Globe Awards, Amy Poehler joked about the controversy around the depiction of the torture in Zero Dark 30, a film co-produced and directed by Cameron's second wife, Kathryn Bigelow. Poehler said, "When it comes to torture, I trust the lady who spent 3 years married to James Cameron." Wow, I knew that Cameron and the film crew of Aliens didn't get along, but I didn't realize he was the directing equivalent of Edward Norton. Steve Harvey. He was married 3 times and cheated. All 3 times. As a result, he was divorced 3 times. Still writes books on relationships. not to mention his views/lack of understanding of evolution. Abe Lincoln got the nickname Honest Abe because of impartial judgment during cockfights. Okay, so I desperately wanted this to be true, but I've done some research, and this anecdote appears to be one of a number of many small events that might possibly have contributed to the name Honest Abe. Not a single person, but the Kennedy family, especially Ted Kennedy, who had an affair with his secretary, got into a car accident with her while DUI, and then left her to die. He also got expelled from Harvard for academic dishonesty several years before that. I believe that when Ted had the accident that killed the girl, he called his political advisor before calling an ambulance. His old man was a Nazism apologist as well, chose to seek appeasement with the Führer, even though he knew that Jews were being massacred and most of Europe was being flattened. Also refused to allow the US Congress to give aid to the UK to fight Germany, and was later involved in helping fund the IRA. I believe when Ted had the accident that killed the girl, he called his political advisor before calling an ambulance. By current standards, pretty much everyone who lived on the planet before about 1800. Michael Jordan was a bit of an a-hole. Can't knock his game, but you can find a lot of bad stuff about him with a simple Google search if you're interested. A bit? That's an understatement. I've never read a single account of a story that portrays Michael Jordan as a decent person or even just a person who isn't a jerk. Jordan is notorious for being a huge D-bag. Andrew Jackson. From the spoils system to the Trail of Tears, thanks again, Mr. Jackson. Let us honor your achievements by placing you on our $20 bill. Well, the guy hated paper money, so putting him on the $20 bill is a big FU to him. I have one of his violins. It's weird considering I'm 1/4 Cherokee. My biggest problem with Thomas Edison was the blatant lies he would spread in order to retain a financial monopoly on power generation. He would travel and run demonstrations of why alternating current is dangerous by electrocuting an animal with something like 5,000 volts, claiming that it was 1/4 of the voltage intended to be used to transmit power, in order to scare people into accepting direct current as the only safe form of electrical transmission. Equivalent DC voltage would have been much more destructive, but he always withheld that information. Horrible is a strong word, but any of the Scientology celebrities, I'd have to say. I'm always surprised by who is a part of it. Woody Allen. To this day, my husband refuses to believe that he is scummy.
Oh, come on! What kind of scummy man would marry his daughter?
Flipping Oprah. Oprah is the only reason people ever even started to pay attention to this entire Jenny McCarthy autism vaccines bullpoop. She is the only reason people trust Dr. Phil to give advice. Spoiler alert, he should not be counseling people, and she's the reason my grandma says stuff like, "But Dr. Oz said that if I eat a lot of green coffee and rub acai beans on my face, I'll look 40. Still love you though, Grandma. Oprah has caused a lot of bullpoop. F Oprah. I hate the hip, quirky reputation Bill Murray has managed to get over the past few years. I used to work at a place where he was occasionally a customer. He's kind of a dismissive jerk. He can be exceptionally rude to the people around him. I understand that celebrities want to be left alone in public like everyone else, but he was often unpleasant with the staff, and nobody there acted like a gawky fan with famous people. We had other famous customers, some much more notable and important than him, and we knew not to make celebrities uncomfortable. Stephen Colbert, David Cross, Joe Biden, all lovely and gracious. Bill Murray is just a complete member for the sake of being one. Jimmy Savile. Over here in the UK, he had his own TV show and was a celebrity, until after he died it was revealed that he was fixing more than the children's wishes. I guess it's past tense, being praised, but yeah. Richard Dawkins is simply immature, his charity was stolen from, and he is simply rude. The only reason he is relevant in the mainstream is because he wrote an edgy book. If it wasn't for that, he would have been just another scientist in another lab, written about only in specific journals. Dawkins is brilliant within his field. The man knows a lot about evolution, but he's a condescending, judgmental a-hole when it comes to other folks' faith. I'm an atheist myself, but I can't stand the way Dawkins talks about religious people, and there have been a fair number of allegations of sexism against him as well. The atheist community could do so much better than Dawkins. I can't stand Dawkins. He's so gosh darn smug. If you're going to be a smug anti-theist, at least be a hilarious alcoholic bohemian like Christopher Hitchens. I'm inclined to agree with the people commenting on this. Dawkins may be smart, but they really need to run his commentary through a spin doctor first. I wouldn't say horrible, but Nelson Mandela is given a free ride on a lot of things. I'm going from memory here and on mobile, so I'm sure someone will correct any errors. For starters, he promised South Africa the Freedom Charter, essentially a 1945 UK-style welfare state, whilst simultaneously selling much of the country's industry off to foreign companies. He had written a lot in Robben Island about how the only way South Africa could go forward was by nationalising industry. He essentially promised a welfare state he knew he couldn't provide, and doomed the poorest of the nation. John Pilgar's Freedom Next Time is a fantastic book about this. He argues that in part thanks to Mandela's actions, South Africa became an economic apartheid, which was just as bad for the people in townships than actual apartheid. He also supported Mbeki's assertions that HIV didn't cause AIDS, and that anti-retroviral drugs were a Western conspiracy. The thing is, weighed against the good he did in South Africa, and how much he helped that country heal, perhaps it isn't that significant. It just annoys me that people are completely unwilling to recognize any of these pretty big flaws. I would treat him as a George Washington. He's not a man who lived, he's the father of the nation and gets a lot of passes for that. You need something to center the culture on. He's a myth, not a man. Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin kidnapped a 14-year-old girl. Wow, I never knew this. In 1972, Page was hanging around a nightclub and laid eyes on 14-year-old Laurie Maddox. He liked what he saw and didn't give a flip that she was underage by, well, a lot. Why should he, after all? The club clearly didn't. As the young, handsome lead guitarist in the biggest rock band in the world, Page was probably very shy and awkward around girls. So, instead he sent roadie Richard Cole to Maddox's table with the message, "Jimmy told me that he's going to have you whether you like it or not." The roadie then grabbed her and chucked her in the back of the limo, saying, "You effing move and I'll effing have your head." From there, they drove back to Page's house, where he and Maddox proceeded to have lots and lots of dirty, unspeakable acts. Of course, Page knew this was incredibly wrong, and if word got out, he was screwed. So he did the only responsible thing he could think of. For 3 long years, Maddox was for the most part kept behind closed doors, so the relationship with Page wasn't discovered and he wouldn't end up in jail. King Arthur. Dude ain't even real. John Wayne. I believe in white supremacy, at least to a point where African Americans are responsibly educated. He was also an aggressive drunk and a draft dodger despite playing heroic roles. Pablo Picasso, genius artist though he undeniably was, treated the people in his life like trash. Affairs on top of affairs. He drove his first wife into a mental breakdown and literally turned their only son into Picasso's chauffeur. He had a child with his first mistress, who he played mind games with on a daily basis for the rest of her life. After he died, she killed herself. His second mistress he drove into a mental breakdown. His third he physically abused. He did have 2 children with her, who he refused to legally acknowledge for years. And his second and final wife, treated like a doormat, who also ended up killing herself after he died. Oh, and after he died, his second wife barred all of his previous family from his funeral, including his grandson, who was so distraught by this, he killed himself too. Amazing, amazing artist, but totally effing sadistic in how he treated the people around him. Oliver Cromwell is massively praised and admired in Britain, often making it into lists of the top 10 greatest Britons in British history. Meanwhile, he is universally vilified in Ireland, and regularly makes it into lists of the top 10 greatest villains in Irish history. I find it quite amazing that the British ignore his genocidal campaigns in Ireland and prefer to erect massive statues of him outside their parliament instead. I mean, I know I'm supposed to praise dear leader, but Kim Jong-un is kind of a d-hole. Arnold Schwarzenegger, illegitimate child with the maid working in his house, reduced the sentence of a convicted murderer for a political friend, signed into law the biggest tax increase in California ever whilst campaigning for lower taxes, and an overall disgusting political weasel. And yet, still one of the more respectable figures in the modern GOP. Jebediah Springfield, aka Hans Sprungfeld. Ronald Reagan was probably involved in the Iran-Contra affair and dealing with Iran before the election against Carter. Republican ties let Iran know they'd get a better deal if they waited until after the election was decided to release the hostages, after which Reagan's staff sold them weapons for gold, which was then funneled into South American right-wing terrorist organizations that killed thousands of people in cold blood. That and his economic policies have led to a lot of the crap we are dealing with today. Mother Teresa. She said that people needed to suffer to be closer to God and would deny medical care to people under her care, so they would suffer and die. One case that changed my opinion was a teenage boy who had a kidney problem, easily fixed by surgery, but the nuns of the order refused to allow him to be taken, and instead just gave him aspirin and waited for him to die. She also diverted a lot of the money donated meant for helping poor people towards extreme pro-life positions, including stopping legal contraception. John Lennon. Not only was his talent blown out of proportion, Imagine is probably the most overrated song of all time, and unintelligent, he was clueless about social issues, he was a pretty horrible person in general. He would beat his family and verbally abuse his son, Julian, who stated publicly that Paul was more of a father to him. On one occasion, Julian was laughing, and John yelled, "I hate the way you effing laugh," and sent him away. There is a long list of horrible things he has done. Winston Churchill wanted to start World War III against Russia the moment Germany was divided up. Oh, and William Wallace. After the Battle of Stirling Bridge, he skinned one of the English lords and made a belt out of his skin. Even for the time, it was needlessly barbaric. Steve Jobs. Misogynist, all but abandoned his daughter for years, a-hole to most people he met, most Appleites will tell you that he sucked as a boss, and that Tim Cook is far better. He deserved to get fired by his own company, as he did early on. Marlon Brando showed up to Apocalypse Now 50 pounds overweight and didn't know a single word of his lines, which is the reason he appears in shadows the whole movie. He's also notorious for being extremely difficult to work with on sets, often never memorizing his lines and having cue cards. The fact that he didn't prepare for roles and was reading cue cards makes his acting even more impressive. Snoop Dogg or Lion or whatever the flip his name is now. People seem to forget that he actually murdered someone but got away with it, but everyone praises him as a chill dude who smokes herb and advocates for legalization. Isaac Newton. Seems like he went out of his way to demolish Leibniz for having independently developed calculus. Christopher Columbus was a horrible human being who pioneered the sex human traffic trade in the Americas using 9 to 10-year-old girls. He was also wildly racist toward the Lucayan natives of the West Indies and once said, "I could conquer the whole lot of them with 50 men and govern them as I pleased." Yet he is honored in the same way Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln are, with a holiday thanks to the Knights of Columbus, a 20th century all-male Catholic group who lobbied Roosevelt for a Catholic role model for boys to look up to. J.D. Rockefeller was a huge piece of poo who tried to cover it by donating a huge chunk of his fortune to universities and medical research. Really though, he was an a-hole. He rigged up explosives in mines and blew them up to send his miners running. The ones that made it up to the surface were then shot as they ran out of the mines. Of course, Rockefeller denied that he had anything to do with it. Jerry Lewis, the telethon guy. He reaped all this goodwill while taking advantage of children with disabilities, using them for his tearjerker broadcasts. He has made awful public comments like that people with MD are living as half a person, and has called people cripples, and reacted poorly to people criticizing the way he strips disabled people of their dignity. The telethon has refused to make their financial records available and account for where all their donations go. Jeremy Clarkson. Venerated by many Redditors, yet he possesses many of the qualities that would make most people here label anyone who had those qualities an industrial-strength D-bag and a-hole. Uses racist language, makes offensive comments, cheats on his wife, punches a co-worker because he doesn't like the food he's given his co-worker a mouthful of abuse for no good reason, then laughs about it because he thinks he has a guaranteed fan base that will turn a blind eye to his scumbaggery. Also, he knows whatever he does, he is financially bulletproof. If the BBC kick him out, another network will pay a fortune to have him on their books. That last bit aged really well. It seems that a few people here have only ever learned about Guy Fawkes from V for Vendetta. So here's a reason to toss out your Hot Topic mask, in addition to the whole sweatshop labor thing. Dude was a religious zealot. The entire goal was to get rid of those danged Protestants. He didn't want to blow up Parliament while being the first person to scream, "Anarchy in the UK." He had a very clear idea of the government that he wanted to replace the current one with. The group of conspirators were kinda basically the Catholic version of religion-based terrorist cell. Additional fun facts that don't contribute to him being a jerk. He was just the guy who got caught, since he was the one in charge of setting the fuse. He changed his name to Guido when he was in Spain trying to muster up help to dismantle the Protestant powers in England. Che Guevara, who helped Fidel Castro overthrow the Cuban government and has since become the poster boy for revolution. Anyone who spoke against the revolution was taken by his guerrilla, murdered and buried. They would then return the burial address to their widows. Frank Lloyd Wright. There are many stories of him not paying people and how much of an ass he was because of his ego. He told his boss, Sullivan, to give him a 5-year contract and enough money for a house which he built on the outskirts of Chicago, and then started designing homes behind Sullivan's back for wealthy clients. He left his first wife and 6 kids for a client's wife, and they went to Europe for a year. He came back, got money from his mom, and settled in Wisconsin. It was there that a servant set the house/studio on fire and murdered Wright's second wife, her 2 children, and 4 others. Wright married again, but she was addicted to morphine and was divorced after a year or so. Despite charging high-end clients a lot of money, he was always short on money because he brought a lot of art, which was destroyed in the fires at his home/studio. There are also stories of him being rude to clients and telling them to stick it. Amazing architect, though. Probably anyone before 1960 we praise was damn near absolutely a racist. Plenty after too, for that matter. It's a hard question because of moral relativity. Is it okay to judge past people by modern standards? Furthermore, as Lord Atton said, paraphrased, great men are almost always bad men. Great men like Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan were undoubtedly genocidal by today's standard. Also, the question of what constitutes bad. Gandhi was a racist. Mother Teresa espoused Catholic doctrine and taught the poor complacency while bringing in money for the church that could have better been spent to improve the lives of those she purported to help. Martin Luther King Jr. cheated on his wife. Short answer, all of them. Great and good people are still only human. They all had flaws. Doctors who have given a second opinion diagnosis. What is the worst first opinion you've ever encountered? I'm a surgeon. Most patients come to me after having seen another physician who has diagnosed them with something and told the patient to see a surgeon. I've been called to see more than one patient for appendicitis who has already had an appendectomy. I've also been called in multiple cases for patients who very obviously have previously undiscovered very advanced cancer. It's always too far advanced for me to be of help, so I have to wonder, am I being called so I can be the bad guy and explain everything? Yes. The answer is yes. This is the opposite answer, but the best request for a second opinion came from a CVS Minute Clinic. Young, healthy law student goes to Minute Clinic. Has the flu, this was a few years ago, no Rona, feels awful. They check him out. Yup, he has a fever. Aches, sore throat, it's the flu. Flu swab positive. His clinic vitals were notable for a heart rate of 140. A bit high, but not crazy high. Reassuring numbers are under 100. The guy otherwise walks into the CVS and is a healthy young guy. Would have been pretty easy to dismiss it. Anyway, the Minute Clinic says go to the ER, you need an EKG. So the guy follows orders. ER chief complaint is, I have the flu and CVS told me to come here. ER gets an EKG and he's in slow VT, which is a life-threatening arrhythmia that you have to be shocked out of. They take a look at his heart and it was giant and barely moving. He had an insane myocarditis. Dude ended up getting cannulated for ECMO within hours, cardiac bypass machines as life support. I can't say all Minute clinics are the same, but holy crap, that was a great save. I'm a gynecologist. The number of times I've seen patients pregnant and upset or happy because some other doctor told them they can't get pregnant, so they didn't use birth control, is appalling. Usually, it's family med. Not ragging on all FM docs, just how it goes. I then have to explain that even if the patient has whatever condition that makes it unlikely for them to get pregnant, the odds are almost never 0%. Maybe less than 1%, but still not a 0, so of course it can happen. Well, when I first started feeling sick on the October of one year at college, I had a non-productive cough, night sweats and trouble sleeping, and I lost some weight. The school nurse gave me Claritin. All of those symptoms got worse, plus I was incredibly fatigued, my lymph nodes swelled up, and I had pretty bad backaches. My GP took a chest x-ray and prescribed antibiotics for pneumonia. At this point, I had almost failed out of school because I was only managing an hour or two of sleep per night. It took until spring break for me to go see a pulmonary specialist. He could instantly tell that it wasn't pneumonia. I had stage 4B Hodgkin's lymphoma. My first PET scan showed cancerous cells and lymph nodes in all 4 quadrants of my body. At this rate, I had lost about a third of my body weight. The cough, weight loss, and back pain were my swollen lymph nodes pressing on my lungs, stomach, and my back. They gave me my first round of chemo, and I felt genuinely incredible. I felt like such crap that an IV mix of carefully measured toxins was an improvement. I went home and ate a whole pizza. Chemo got crappier, but it worked, so I guess I can't complain too much. I'm a lawyer, but had a client given a devastating diagnosis of an extremely rare heart condition. Doctor told him he had 6 weeks to live. He contacted me to make his will and set his affairs in order. Thankfully, he sought a second opinion with an extremely well-known cardiologist. I guess the cardiologist was intrigued due to the rare nature of the heart condition. There was nothing wrong with him. He was fine. This poor guy and his family were tortured over this, so devastated and terrified, for nothing. He actually called me to tell all of this. He seemed to still be in a joyous, I'm not going to die stage, but I imagine anger comes at some point when you take stock of what you went through. I don't know how a doctor flips up that massively, or if somehow my client's results were mixed up with someone else's, and some poor fellow's number is almost up and they don't even know it. Patient. When I was in college, I went to the doctor because I was peeing razors. It progressed pretty rapidly, and by the end of the week, I couldn't walk or sleep. The doctor asked me about my romantic life, and I told him the truth that my girlfriend and I had only been with each other and together for many years. He sort of scoffed at that and told me it was likely chlamydia. He had a long condescending speech about safe, fun times with me and then sent me home. A week later, my pee tests were back. Turns out I had the worst bladder infection they'd ever seen. I had to have a camera shoved up my pee hole, multiple rounds of antibiotics, and to this day I struggled to pee due to irreversible damage in the infection caused. I don't know about you listeners, but the story made the narrator feel sympathy pain in his nether regions. I have one that happened to me. I did college gymnastics. My senior year I had an accident in practice landing on my neck. Went to the hospital, got x-rays, was told I was perfectly fine. Walked around in pain for a while. Weeks later went to another doc, got a new set of images. My neck was broken in 3 places and had a dislocation. Had a multi-level fusion surgery days later. Found out my x-rays got swapped with someone else's in the ER, and I was originally diagnosed based on someone else's images. This was found out when I went to get my recordings long after my surgery for insurance purposes, and had my files and someone else's medical records and images in it. Because of the time I spent walking around with it, I have had a posterior surgery instead of anterior, which is way more invasive and gives me major issues to this day. Not a doctor. My husband had a situation where he almost died because of misdiagnosis. To preface this, at the time, we were young in our mid-20s, living in a college town. My husband had horrible pain, on floor, on hands and knees, horrible. We went to the ER and the doctor barely looked at him and just told him to stop drinking and it would be fine. We go home, the pain is getting worse and now he is vomiting. As soon as the doctor's office opens back home, where we grew up, we drove 1.5 hours to see our primary care. Within 15 minutes of walking into the GP office, my husband was rushed to emergency surgery. His gallbladder had almost completely ruptured and he was going septic. It was a total mess and he almost died because of a misdiagnosis. Obligatory, I am not the doctor, but the patient. I went to a sleep doctor because I was constantly tired and falling asleep standing up and such. Serious stuff. Doctor was like, well, you're overweight, so it's definitely sleep apnea. I did a sleep study, came back negative for sleep apnea. Doctor was like, well, I'm still positive it's sleep apnea because you're a porker. So he sent me home with a CPAP machine for a month. After a month of using the machine, which records your sleep apnea events every night, and still said I didn't have sleep apnea, and with me having zero improvement in my symptoms, I went back to him and he said, well, if this isn't working, I can't help you, because you obviously have sleep apnea, since all tubbos have sleep apnea, so you must not be using the CPAP. So I dropped him like a fresh turf and went to get a second opinion. New sleep doc, new sleep study. Came back and the new doctor says, yeah, this is textbook narcolepsy. You have all the symptoms and the sleep study proves it beyond a shadow of a doubt. I told him about the other doctor and he said, this is obviously narcolepsy. Your previous doctor was a moron. And unlike the other quotes in this story, this is an actual direct quote. I'll never forget the look of disgust on his face when he said the word moron. Not a doctor, but my sister was suffering from headaches and minor seizures for a while. Went to an urgent care and they told us that she had an anxiety disorder and just needed something to calm her down. We got a second opinion at the ER and turns out she had stage 4 brain cancer. I miss her every day. Wow, we trust doctors for so much and I'm sure that they're doing their best with the time they have. But stories like this, consider a second opinion sometimes, folks. I just left a practice partly because a woman brought her 8-month-old in for a second opinion. The practice owner had seen the rapidly enlarging sacral soft tissue mass, which the mother first noticed about 6 weeks prior. He told her not to worry about it. I checked his notes, which read, "Plan, ignore." I was shocked. There was a new onset rapidly enlarging blue-purple cystic mass on the baby's sacrum. It looked like a small plum under the skin at the top of her bum crack. And without any investigation, my colleague dismissed it. I was appalled. The mother was relieved. This wasn't the first not great judgment I've seen, but it was one of the worst. I realized I couldn't work in a clinic where I'd be stepping on other doctors' toes and couldn't trust their judgment. The babies had an imaging and a referral to a pediatric surgeon, but unfortunately I don't know the outcome because I'm working elsewhere now. Obligatory, I'm not a doctor, but when I had my wisdom teeth out, it was pretty brutal. Like they had to put me completely under, dig deep into my jawbone, the teeth were coming in sideways and upside down, just like the worst case scenario. So I have the surgery and the next couple of days I'm in a lot of pain, which happens. And I realize I have this growing hot lump on the side of my jawbone. Me being a dumbass, I tried to be like, oh, it'll go away. But it didn't, and my mum caught sight of it, and took me back to the guy who did my surgery. Dentist dude took an x-ray and without even examining it or asking any questions first, said I was fine and it was probably just scar tissue and told me to leave. I thought, hey, well, he's smarter than me, so I guess he's right. My mother, however, did not think this. And so off we go for a second opinion, and while we're headed over to the other office, the hard lump in my jaw bursts and blood and pus leaks everywhere in my mouth. It was so effing gross. My mum immediately turned around, drove back to the dental surgeon, dragged me, who was still spitting blood and pus, barged into the office and made the dental surgeon look in my mouth. The dental surgeon muttered something about hysterical women seeing things that weren't there, but prescribed me antibiotics and more pain meds anyway. And that was how the 1 to 2 week recovery took an entire month and I ended up having to drop out of a college course due to missing so much. I tasted this story. My uncle-in-law went to multiple doctors about leg pain and trouble walking. He's a big guy and every doctor told him in more or less condescending ways that his issue was that he needed to lose weight. After 5 years, he finally got someone to MRI him and it turned out he had a, by then, grapefruit-sized tumor in his leg. He unfortunately died about 6 months later because it metastasized. Yeah, being overweight is unhealthy, but seriously, F all those doctors that wouldn't believe he was in pain and just saw a fat person. Not a doctor, it was my doctor. I was a child and had a lot of trouble with abdominal pain. Mum kept taking me to the doctors, and he kept minimizing it, saying there was nothing wrong. Went on for a long time until I was doubled over in pain outside school one day. Mum asked me if it was hurting, and I told her it always hurt, and I just told her when it was really bad. She took me straight to my doctor's surgery and demanded I got looked into further, figuring a 5-year-old child shouldn't be living in constant pain. A few scans later, and I was immediately whisked into surgery. My mum still can't think of me being wheeled into the theatre when her and the doctors did not even actually know what exactly was wrong and what they were going to do. The plan was to open me up, figure out the exact issue, and go from there. I had an extra growth on my kidney, which was all infected, an extra ureter that was infected the whole way along. The doctor who had continually fobbed my mum off as a panicking parent whose child has nothing wrong with them actually ended up making a house visit to apologize. I went to the ER for some crazy stomach pain, and the doc there said it was because my thyroid was super inflamed. The thing is, I don't have a thyroid. I was born without one, and I take meds every day because of this. I tell her this, and she says, "No, that can't be true, your thyroid is enormous," and sent me to do an ultrasound. Lo and behold, it's not there. She refused to believe this and asked my primary doctor to explain my seemingly crazy anatomy. He goes, "Yeah, he doesn't have a thyroid." Turns out what she thought she saw was actually my Adam's apple, which I guess is sorta big. I had a period of about a year where I was getting constant UTIs, which is apparently, as a woman in her 20s, is normally caused by not peeing after doing it. I'm still not sure what was causing mine, but I was not active in the bedroom at all due to vaginismus. My doctor was away for school holidays and stupidly I thought I could last a week until she was back. Nope, 2 days later I could barely move from the couch in pain, so I called a doctor. This doctor, a home doctor because it was a public holiday, refused to hand over the script until I acknowledged that I was being sexually irresponsible. When I said, I am a virgin, embarrassing and potentially dangerous statement to make with a strange man in my house while I was home alone, this jackass laughed his ass off and said, "No, you're not. Nobody is at this age. Stop pretending to be all innocent." Slammed the prescription on my coffee table and walked out, refusing to give me the starter dose that they're required to carry for people like me who are alone and can't get the prescription until the first dose kicks in enough to begin helping. I called the office to complain and he did get reprimanded. But holy heck was I embarrassed. Not a doctor. My grandmother fell from her horse one day. Not a terrible fall, but from the way she landed, she wanted to get checked out. She felt she had really jolted her spine and neck and was an older lady with fragile bones. Her doctor looked things over, gave her one of those soft neck cushion things, and sent her home. A couple days later, she decided to get a second opinion. No real reason, she just hadn't felt listened to by the first guy. The second doctor basically took one look at her x-rays and freaked out. He told her they needed to get her immediately into a brace to immobilize her spine. I googled to try and figure out what it was. I think it was a halo brace, but in my memory it's bigger and more metal than what I was seeing in the pictures. Basically, she had broken her neck, the same injury that paralyzed Christopher Reeve, but she wasn't paralyzed because the vertebrae hadn't dislocated. The second doctor said anything that did dislocate it, another minor fall, twisting wrong in bed, would mean being permanently paralyzed from the neck down. She wore her intense metal brace that kept her spine in place for a few months, and was totally fine. She lived another 15 years after that. But I think about that story often. The second doctor saved her mobility and freedom. Not a doctor, but I second opinioned the doctor I had for 2 years in high school. He diagnosed me, gave me the medical certificates and drugs for pleurisy, twice, glandular fever, shingles, tonsillitis, despite no tonsils, and malaria. 5 different diseases within 2 years for an otherwise healthy 16-year-old girl. My teachers would read these medical certificates and go, 2 weeks off for malaria? Just after you recovered from your bout of glandular fever too? Very unfortunate. Clearly not buying a word of it. It was ridiculous. I specifically remember with the shingles one telling him that I have psoriasis, I've had for years, and I think it just popped up randomly on my ribs. He said, "No, it's shingles, and it's quite rare for a young person like yourself to contract it." But he gave me 2 weeks off, so I didn't try to fight it too hard. Dude clearly just found a medical license on the street and claimed it as his own. She's depressed because of work. No, Mom, she has schizophrenia. She has borderline personality disorder. Did you mean she is female and insisting there is something wrong with her when you want to write her off? Also, what she has is a brain tumor, so thanks for playing, but goodbye. He has anxiety. He has OCD, and I'm not sure how you missed it. It's not subtle. He just took some bad acid. Urine tests say no, and patient says he doesn't do drugs. And I get he's a teenager, but unless he took acid 4 months ago, while never being alone in the house because of lockdown, and it's only affecting him now by pixie magic, I guess, then I think what he has is psychosis, and I would like to admit him, please and thank you. Also, an infinite array of prisoners diagnosed as officers as making it up, when the answer was serious mental illness, but there's a reason I got the flip out of that job. I get the feeling that this is a prison care worker of some sort, they didn't mention it in the post. Nurse here. I cared for a woman who had been diagnosed with broken vertebrae. She was in a lot of pain, couldn't get her pain under control, and her blood pressure was very low. She'd lose consciousness and be very difficult to wake. I also couldn't get her doctor to answer the phone middle of the night. Something just felt off about the whole situation. He finally answered and demanded that we Narcan her, insisting we'd overdosed her on narcotics, following his orders. I then had a hysterical woman in a lot of pain, going in and out of consciousness. I finally walked down to the entrance of the hospital and grabbed the cardiologist, who came in at 4:30 a.m. for rounds, and said, "This isn't your patient, but I think he's going to die." He came upstairs with me, looked at her and her chart, grabbed the bed and rolled her to ICU himself. I have no idea how the conversation went between the cardiologist and her doctor. She didn't have a broken back, she had an aortic aneurysm, which caused the pain and the low pressure and the loss of consciousness. She died the next day. Doctors, if the nurse says something is wrong, you might want to lay your eyes on the patient rather than shouting orders through the phone. Oh, I have one. Not a doctor, but watch the biggest flip-ups ever. So, my sister is very tall, very thin, and very fit. She was in pre-season for her WNBL season, running medium distances. She had a sudden sharp pain in the left side of her chest, radiating arm pain and shortness of breath. She called an ambulance and was rushed to hospital. They did all the tests with the beep-beep machines and determined no heart attack. Said she tore a muscle and sent her home. Welp, a week later she's still in pain and she swears she hears a hissing sound in her chest. She sees our GP. He listens to the chest, has her breathe in and out, goes, "You've torn your lung." She's a perfect candidate for a torn lung. Tall, thin, fit. The GP was amazed the hospital didn't hear the tear. How do you miss a torn lung in the perfect candidate for a torn lung? I am a doctor, just not the right kind. When I was 20 or so, I started feeling dizzy, disorientated, tired all the time like I could never get enough sleep. My male family doctor literally patted me on the head and said I was just a type A young lady, and the problem was my monthlies gave me anxiety. Yeah, no, turns out I have a brain malformation that gives me epilepsy and associated narcoleptic episodes. He's since retired, unrelated, but he should have years ago. My coworker went to a free walk-in clinic once because he wasn't feeling really well. The doctor told him he either had a really bad cold or AIDS. Actual doctor here. Someone came in with a diagnosis of toxic shock syndrome by their nurse practitioner, was sent to the ER, lights and sirens. The NP called ahead to say how sick this kiddo was. Kid shows up, it's scabies. Like it was actually flipping scabies. Not even close to toxic shock syndrome. I literally sent the kid home within 30 minutes of them arriving. Yes, I did call the NP back and educated her on what toxic shock syndrome actually was, and what can cause it. The girl wasn't even asked if she used tampons. She didn't. I told the parents to switch to a different provider, preferably an MD/DO.
Reddit. What's your best, no time to explain, let's go story? I'll start. Happened back when I was 16 to 17. Was hanging late one night at an out-of-the-way basketball court with 3 of my very attractive female friends. We were just shooting some hoops and talking when someone suggested a game of strip basketball. The 3 girls wanted to be on a team together, so they told me I could go choose anyone I wanted for my second. Naturally, I bolted for my high school's basketball team captain's house, pounded on his door at 10 p.m., sweating and out of breath, and said, "No time to explain, let's go." I didn't know him very well, and he had no reason to go with me, but we were both happy he did. The girls weren't happy with my choice, but they kept their word, and we got a nice show. Your turn. A few years back, my brother pulled up to my house with a paintball gun and told me to get in. He hands me the gun and says, "You'll know when to shoot." We go on a short drive to a corner where some kids began to egg his truck. I knew when to shoot. My archaeology crew and I were stuck in La Paz, Bolivia because of civil unrest that cut the roads leading to our dig site. We had been hanging out in La Paz for 2 weeks, trying to stay as warm as possible and waiting for any opening in the demonstrations. The Bolivian army fired into a crowd, killing several demonstrators, and both sides called a truce for 24 hours. That morning, our professor ran into our rented apartment and yelled for us to grab all our gear. We have 5 minutes to leave. We had no idea what was going on. The prof took the next combi, and my poor Spanish skills meant I couldn't ask questions of my fellow passengers. We boarded one of the first combis out of La Paz and headed out to the Altiplano. On the road, we passed huge roadblocks, burning tires, piles of broken glass, and various debris with just enough room for a small car to make it through. We made it far enough to hike the remaining 12 hours to the site next day, and then we started digging. Went to a bar with some friends and my parents in my hometown for my 21st birthday. Turns into a good 6 hours of drinking. Went to the bathroom, and while closing the lid after finishing, the entire bottom of the bowl shatters. I was legally drunk for my first time at said bar, and proceeded to urge very loudly that we needed to leave. "No, I don't think you understand. I destroyed a toilet. Let's go." A group of bigots named Homosex is Sin visit Georgia Tech about every year to tell everyone why gays will burn in hell, women engineers are witches, blah blah blah. When I saw they were in front of the student center, I ran back to my place to find my camera and stereo. My friend was passed out right next to both items, still hungover from the night previous. I shook him and said, "Put on the smallest boxers you own and follow me." This is what happened. What follows is a link to a video where the two men are dancing in their smallest boxers in front of the bigots, set to techno music as a crowd cheers them on. Godspeed, you beautiful people. When I was 8, my parents took me over to their friend's house for an early dinner party. They had a daughter my age who was also my friend. She was really into animals and nature, so she wanted me to go with her about a block down her street to investigate a bird's nest she saw earlier in a tree. We go, she starts climbing while I'm on the ground watching. Then, about half a block away, this hippie-looking surfer dude with long blonde hair and wearing nothing but shorts walks out of his house and notices us. I notice him for about 2 seconds and then look back up in the tree at my friend. Next, I hear a loud whistle, and when I look back in the direction of the surfer dude, he has his shorts down around his ankles with his willy whacker out in all its glory. I yell, "Run!" My friend is clueless, but somehow she manages to jump out of the tree and we run back to her house as fast as our pint-sized legs will carry us. Luckily, my dad and her dad were right inside, and when I yelled, "There's a naked man chasing us," they were outside almost immediately. They find the surfer dude standing right in front of their driveway. I remember my dad saying, "Hey man, are you pulling your pants down in front of children?" And the guy responding with something like, "Screw you, man," and then walking away. The amazing thing is that we called the cops and they came over to file a report, but they recommended not pressing charges because the guy knew where we lived and might seek revenge. This was back in the mid-1970s. Hurricane Charlie was going to do a normal ride out the storm situation and play video games and eat junk food all weekend while it rained outside. I got a call from a buddy who said the hurricane just turned 90 degrees and made landfall in Sanibel, like 20 to 25 miles away. I rushed into my roommate's room and said, "Grab 2 days worth of clothes. We're getting the heck out of here." When we came back to the house, it had been destroyed. The roof leaked and held water in the ceiling until it completely caved in, completely destroying everything we had in there. Not sure if this counts, but I was in high school and espied a hot girl waiting for the bus. Being me and knowing I would just awkward all over myself if I tried things the normal way, I got on my best panicked face, ran up to her, and said, "Quick, quick, there's no time, I need your phone number." She blurted it out. I actually kept it in my head until I could get it down on paper and called her that night. We've been together for 13 years. I own a skate shop, and it was also a popular hangout for skater kids. I was off one day, and I get a call from an ecstatic skate kid that sounded in panic saying, "Get to the shop now!" Click. I rushed down there 2 minutes later. Anthony Kiedis walks into the shop. One of the kids had run into him in town and convinced him to come into the shop. All the skater kids are in my shop behind the counter with my employee, pretending to work on things, put skateboards together, etc. It was hilarious to see them try to act naturally, and we all got to have a good conversation with Anthony Kiedis about skating, paddleboarding, and kiteboarding. He signed a girl's skate deck for our wall of fame that I still have. He's been back every year since then and is a regular customer. This past summer, I delivered paddleboards out to his vacation home. For the uninformed like I was before I read this post, Anthony Kiedis is the lead singer of Red Hot Chili Peppers. And now, it's time for a pheasant tangent. Got a phone call from my sister one evening, and when I picked up the phone, she was clearly running and out of breath. I could just make out her saying, "Open the front door," before the line went dead. So I ran to the front door, picking up the heaviest thing I could find along the way. It was a climbing helmet. Wrenched the door open and moved out the way just in time to see her bolting into the house past me. I slammed the door and waited for her to catch her breath. There was a giant pheasant chasing me all the way from Tesco. "Don't worry, ma'am. I've got this." With that, I donned the climbing helmet and told her to call the police if I wasn't back in 5 minutes. When I was a kid, my village had an evil jerk of a pheasant that would chase old ladies down the street. You could look out of the window and it would be strutting around the village square waiting for a pensioner to attack. Anyway, one day I was out in the garden with my dad, who was plucking a dead pheasant, and this devil bird jumped up onto the high fence and looked at us. I'm not kidding when I say it had the craziest look in its eye. I asked my dad to use my water pistol to blast it, so he pumped it to full power and shot the pheasant in the chest. This crazy bird just gripped the fence for the entire time it was being savaged by the jet of water from my Super Soaker 2000. It didn't fall off, and only flew off of its own accord about 10 minutes later. Then a day later I saw it dead in the road. When I was about 13, my buddy and I rode our bikes to the local Kmart to be bored, obnoxious teenagers. Real quick, this story is from 11 years ago, so oh my god, I feel old now. Anyway, tossed some Nerf footballs over the aisles, ran around, mocked things. Then I thought it would be funny to spray my buddy with the perfume sample. He didn't think it was funny at all and started chasing me. I ran and hid, and the hunt was on. Using his finest ninja skills, he snuck around until he saw me, crouched down in the hardware aisle. He crept up behind me, put his butt right next to my head, and let rip. He turned around to gloat, and it wasn't me. Just some poor schmuck looking at hammers. The next thing I know, he runs by me. We gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go! I was in high school, and my friend came running up to me and said, "No time to explain, I need your shoes." I spent the rest of the day walking around the school in socks and some makeshift shoes made out of a cardboard box. I later found out that the reason why my friend needed my shoes was so that he could participate in his chem lab class and not fail due to his not wearing shoes. Me and my friend are heading to Sonic for lunch. Suddenly he screams, "Pull over!" pointing across the road and across 2 lanes of traffic. Why? No time to explain. Go! So I hit the gas and barely avoid getting creamed. Across the way, I see what he noticed first, a man holding down a woman in the dirt near the ditch beside the road and striking her. We start to get out, he sees us, lets her go, and gets in his car. A moment later, another car pulls up and some older women swarm over the struck woman as he begins to drive away. We hop in our car and give chase. I hand him my phone, he calls the cops. We end up leading the way on a car chase with officers slowly assembling en masse behind us. Finally, we chase him to a house and block the driveway with our car as he gets out and runs behind the house. Knowing we have no right to chase, we let the police take it from there, but we checked the car. It had kids in it. The police interviewed us later, told us that the kids belonged to the woman, and if we hadn't followed the man, they might not have found the car. Felt like big heroes. Best part was, on the way home, we helped the fellow with the broken radiator, and in the middle of getting him taken care of, the police called us after they caught him, and I got to say this awesome line. "Bro, that was Officer X. They need us down at the station." Broken radiator guy was all, "Who are you?" My brother is 11 years older than me and stayed with my dad with my parents divorced, so I never really got to live with him when we were young. When I was about 14, he barged into my room at 4 a.m. and told me to pack your crap for 4 days. Our flight leaves in 2 hours. Soon after, I was on a plane. Turns out he had planned us a trip to Colorado to go snowboarding and told no one but my mom 1 hour before he told me. My dad working in the World Trade Center heard a huge crash several floors above him. Boss looks at him and says, "No time. Let's go." He lived. About 11 or 12 years ago, I was taking my dog for a walk in the forest behind the local elementary school. He seemed all anxious to get off leash, so I unleash him since I figure he wants to run around and pee on everything. The moment I let him off leash, he starts barking at me. In hindsight, my best guess is what he was trying to convey was, "No time to explain, let's go." And then he bolts. I'm ticked off and start chasing after him, but he was fast, even by dog standards. Turns out on the other side of the woods, there was a middle-aged guy who had exposed himself to a group of young girls. They ran away screaming, and he was trying to make a grab for one of them. It was at this moment that my dog came bursting out of the woods like Lassie or Rin Tin Tin or some crap. My dog was popular among the kids, so they knew him. They screamed his name and ran towards him. The pedo bailed, with his Johnson still hanging out of his pants. I was fully prepared to reprimand my dog for being a jerk. Then I found out what happened. He got steak for dinner. Freshman year in college at a school in Boston. Sick as a dog. Newfound ROTC friend with similar taste as myself comes running into my room and tells me he needs me. I tell him I'm sick and can't go anywhere. He refuses my denial and forces me to come with him. Flash forward 45 minutes in a car, and we are arriving at Gillette Stadium. Turns out there is a Halo 3 tournament being held for Army recruitment purposes. He is very aware of my Halo skills due to the sleepless nights we spent when Halo 3 first came out. Ended up placing second, and along the way beating Jared Mayo. He was physically upset and said he wanted to kill me. Felt awesome to beat a professional football player at something. All of this occurred in the box seating of an empty stadium, which we have an amazing view of. So surreal. Army recruitment via Halo 3? Are we fighting the Flood? Is Area 51 home to the Flood?
Wake up, sheeple! The government is hiding aliens under our freaking noses!
My wife and I went to Scandinavia in the winter for our honeymoon. First Copenhagen, then Helsinki, then northern Finland. Yes, this is an odd choice. Our flight got diverted, and en route to Copenhagen, our luggage, including all of our winter gear, was lost, and the airline was unable to locate it for the 4 days we were in Copenhagen. However, we made friends with one of the customer service agents at the airport. We returned to the airport on the day of our flight to Helsinki, still with no luggage, and dreading the Arctic cold we were about to fly into. Temperatures were in the single digits in Finland, but unable to do anything about it. Magically, we found our luggage at the airport that morning and went through security to our gate. It was about half an hour before boarding when our friend from customer service on the other side of the airport ran out to us and said, "Follow me and don't ask any questions. We don't have much time and there is something I must do for you." Then he led us through a series of back hallways in the airport to his office. "What I'm about to tell you, you must tell no one else," he said. "In 20 minutes, our pilots are going to announce a strike and all our flights will be grounded." This was in no way public knowledge. He put us on another flight to Helsinki with a different airline, and we watched in gratitude and amazement from the Finnair terminal as the strike was announced, and our original flight, along with every single other SAS flight leaving Copenhagen, was grounded. Epilogue: we found ourselves in Copenhagen again a year later, and we went to the airport specifically to try and find our friend and thank him, but it was his day off. I'd ask Reddit to pass on my thanks, but I'm pretty sure what he did was against company policy, and I wouldn't want to get him in trouble for doing a good deed for a young couple. I was at a house party over the summer that started going a bit south, so my friend and I decided to just get in the car and drive home. We got to the car and were waiting for the third guy in our group when a very, very drunk guy came up with his red Solo cup of beer. We were friendly to him, asked him what he was drinking and all. He decided the best reaction to this was to throw the beer at me while I sat in the car. After this happened, I noticed a group of about 7 or 8 more drunk people ambling towards the car. They did not look happy. My friend decided the best response to this was to go to the back of his car, grab his shotgun and 2 shells. Oh crap. He stood next to his car with the drunk people slowly approaching and yelled at them once, "Get away from my car," while loading the shells. They did not stop. He fired once into the air away from them, cocked the gun, and said again, "Get away from my car." About a third of them left after that, so he fired once more and the rest scattered. He had just fired a gun at a house party. Twice. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Our friend then came out of the house screaming. No time to explain, let's go. We never went back to that house. TLDR, nearly drunken brawl broken up by shotgun. Walking home from playing football in the park, and my dad, aggressively speeding down the road in his car, brakes hard next to me. He looks angry as heck, and my little brother is crying, and he sternly says, "Get in." I roll with it, and he speeds around the park looking attentively out the window. My little brother points at a group of lads, maybe 16 to 17 years old. One of them is running with my little brother's glasses. He's only about 10 years old. My dad jumps out of the car, rugby tackling the lad to the floor. My dad is huge, and the lads look petrified. My dad absolutely bawls at them for about 5 minutes, and after that, he gets back in the car, and then we go to McDonald's. Dads out there listening to this right now, if you aren't willing to body slam someone for your kid, what are you doing with your life? I was at a sporting event with some friends. Wow, it was 10 years ago. Now I feel old. The bleachers were metal benches on concrete and set up amphitheater style, going down a hill and all the concessions and bathrooms on the top of the hill behind us. It's about halftime and I'm thirsty. I also see that it's starting to cloud up. I tell my friends I'm gonna go grab a drink and be right back. I walk to the top of the stairs and I see the biggest, nastiest thundercloud I have ever seen, and it's about to crap bricks right on top of us. I hauled it down the stairs, grab the friend closest to the aisle and yell, "We gotta go." It takes a second for it to register, but everyone grabs the important stuff and then follows me up the stairs, across the food court, and into the bathroom. Suddenly, the temperature drops by at least 10 degrees. The wind gusts. The last friend in almost lost her hat. Seconds later, we hear a huge clang on the tin roof of the bathroom, and then another, and then another. Then out the door, we see golf ball to orange-sized hail everywhere. TLDR, I saved my friends from being caught in bleachers in a nasty hailstorm. It was the middle of the night on a road trip with a friend. She's a city mouse, I'm country. I was driving, she was sleeping, and I started to get sleepy. So I pulled off the highway onto a barely paved road and followed it for a while until I found a wide shoulder to pull off. I parked and we got out so she could have a cigarette. There were loads of stars and we leaned against the car having one of those hushed middle-of-the-night conversations. Then, I heard rustling in the woods 8 feet from us. At first I ignored it, but then I realized there was a pattern. I'd hear it at the 10 position, then at 2, then back to 10. It was more than one thing making the rustling noise, and they were getting closer. And I realized something was hunting us. So I put on my power voice and told her, get in the car. Her eyes got wide and she hopped in really quick. I jumped in and we took off back to the highway. She turned to me and asked, was it an axe murderer or something? I told her no, it was probably wolves. And she got mad at me for scaring her. She didn't see how wild animals stalking us could possibly be dangerous. Doing some bodywork on a Cessna 350 when my buddy comes running into the shop with his eyes nearly bugging out of his head. Goldfish, come on, follow me. What is it? I'm busy. Just come here. I have to finish this work. Is it important? Just follow me. It's important. I'm not going unless you tell me what it is first. Cake! Turns out it was somebody's birthday at work and there was free cake in the break room. If somebody could take that cake soundbite and turn it into Space Core from Portal, I would love you forever. So, I had a job driving a taxi, night shift. I'm waiting in the cab lineup from my next fare when a native Indian stumbles up to my taxi, asks me if I want to buy some beer. No thanks, pal. You sure? I'll sell you a case for $15. Keep in mind, I'm in Canada, and a case will normally cost around $40. I say sure, and he hops in and tells me to drive around the corner to the golf course. I'm skeptical, but I go for it. We arrive, and he runs into some bushes and comes out with a 24-pack of beer. I laugh, pay him, and ask if there's more. Yeah, if you buy 10, I'll sell them to you for $10 each. I gave him $190 more. He runs towards the bushes, looks back at me, and yells, well, you gonna come help me with them or what? I follow him to the bushes, and there is a skid full of cases of beer. We take 19 more and load them into the back of my taxi van. I get the nice gentleman's phone number for next time, and we say our goodbyes. Fast forward 15 minutes. I've driven home. It's 3 a.m. I was living in a house in a row of townhomes. Neighbors surely hear me pull up, open and slam my door. I run in, wake up my roommate, and yell, no time to explain, let's go. He rushes downstairs, puts on shoes, and follows me back to the cab. I open the rear doors and his jaw drops. Where did you find this? No time to explain, I respond. So, here we are, my half-naked friend and I running 20 cases of beer from the street to my house at 3 a.m. I am amazed that no neighbors had awoken and looked out their windows and called the phone number on the van. When we finished and I had time to explain, my roommate gave me $200 and we went and got another 20 cases, this time from a skid hidden behind some trees at a park on a local lake. TLDR, bought 20 cases of beer from an Indian, woke up roommate at 3 a.m. to help rush it into our house. We built a wall between our kitchen and living room with cases of said beer. Generally calm people of Reddit, what made you lose your absolute mind that time? It always felt like my parents never wanted me. I was a surprise honeymoon baby born 9 months and a day after their wedding. I was regularly screamed at for anything I did until I just started hiding. I was called, quote, the practice child my whole life. My younger siblings got way more love and attention, etc. In my teens, they started taking in, quote, strays. If any neighborhood kids didn't want to go home, they could just be at our house all the time. Effectively, my mother would take my friends away from me to be her friends instead. One of which was a kid who picked on me constantly from the time I was 11. I guess they had that in common. That guy was kicked out of his dad's house and his mom's house when he was 20, so my parents took him in permanently. That killed me. But I always wanted their approval, so I was always calm and agreeable, always desperately trying to figure out how to get them to love me, so I went along with it. Years later, I'm married and have a son. This guy still lives with my parents. They continue to coddle and make excuses for him while criticizing me for whatever they feel like. One day, we're all at my parents' house and my son is being a goofy 2-year-old, which annoys the man-child living there. So he gets furious, picks my son up by his ankle, and spanks him. My parents claim not to have seen it. We went home. I couldn't sleep that night because I was so upset. The next morning, I made sure the guy and my mom would be at home, and why wouldn't he be there? And I went to confront them with my wife. I dumped everything I had been putting up with on them for about an hour, including asking how my mom could allow this jerk to hit my son. She maintained that it didn't happen, so I went through the roof. I ended up crying because of all the pent-up emotion, so my fantastic wife took over. She said we wouldn't be coming back if the guy still lived there, so he yelled that he would move out and he stormed off after saying he didn't have to listen to this. My parents convinced him not to move out shortly after we left. My mother expressed how disappointed she was that I didn't come, quote, to have a conversation and only came to, quote, dump on them. That was her big takeaway from everything I said, that I wasn't being fair to them. We went to counseling with them later. For months, it validated everything I had felt, but they never stopped lying and being defensive. One counselor said we should be on Dr. Phil. The other counselor said my mom is, quote, incapable of empathy. Both counselors called my parents delusional, but of course, my parents didn't take any of that seriously. At one point, my dad asked me, who does he think he is to judge us like that? As if he forgot that's their job. Haven't spoken with them in almost a year, and life is so much better. My brother and I played travel sports for a few seasons as kids. One trip, I was at the pool with some of his teammates messing around in the water, and the coach's kid was being a jerk as usual. My brother was one of the smaller kids on his team, so the coach's son would screw with him a lot. Most of the kids on my brother's team disliked him, but didn't speak up so they wouldn't be next. He thought it would be funny to pick up my brother's drink right in front of him and spit into it. My dad taught me from a young age not to let anyone screw with my brother or sister, so I got seriously angry. I took a good running start and shoulder-checked him into the pool. Since he had just gotten there, he hadn't taken his clothes off yet and cried because his phone and iPod got ruined. He literally ran out yelling, "I'm telling my dad!" Well, that backfired because everyone stuck up for my brother, and the coach was not happy to find out what a crap bird his son was being, so he was the only one to get in any trouble. Sometimes justice is a dish best served cold, and other times it's served extremely wet. Ruined iPod and all. My grandfather passed away, so I told my boss that I had to take a couple of days off to be with my family. He had the nerve to tell me work was more important than family and threatened to fire me. I went off on him in the middle of the office for a solid 5 minutes before quitting and rushing home. This lady came to the shelter to see the cats. She asked if she could give them treats, and I said yes. It's a shelter where most of the cats are free. So she gets the bag out, the cats are going wild with anticipation, and she just stood there, laughing and tempting them without giving them anything. She looked like she enjoyed their anxiety, and her laugh sounded like a crazy person. I lost it, grabbed the bag out of her hands, gave treats to the cats, and asked her to leave. Those cats are already stressed out. Don't give them more anxiety. I can remember that day like it was yesterday. I was home packing my stuff to get ready for when my husband was out of basic training. I never yell or even raise my voice to hardly anyone ever. My dad has always had a wicked temper, and my sister also had a knack for starting yelling matches with him. One night, she forgot to do something she was supposed to, and the yelling started again. I ignored it up until he called her stupid. It got under my skin, so I spoke up a little saying that he shouldn't call her that. He hollered back, "You are my daughters. I can talk to you however I want." That's when I snapped. I saw red for the first time in my life, and I completely lost it. I screamed back at him at how I was tired of him treating us like garbage when he lost his temper, at how we hid in the back room with my mom until he cooled off, and how all I wanted was to visit my family before I had to move over 12 hours away from them. I also threatened that if he ever wanted to see me again, then he needed to shut up and sit in the corner until he was done throwing a fit. I yelled at him for the first time in my life for a solid 30 minutes. I didn't stop until everything I had to say built over the years was out, and I saw him go from red-faced angry to what seemed to be guilt-ridden. When I finally stopped, he was quiet. He didn't say a word and walked away. Shortly after I moved out, he went to a doctor and has been put on some medication to help with his anger issues. Now, he's super friendly. and I haven't heard him throw a tantrum like he used to in over 10 years now. He has never spoken poorly to me or my sister since then either. I lost my mind when my patient got her pre-authorization for surgery for a large grapefruit-sized pelvic mass denied by BCBS, and when I did a peer-to-peer, the doctor working for the insurance company said I needed to have a psychiatrist rule out mental causes of her pain first. I had to walk away for 30 minutes before seeing another patient because, had anyone given me any more lip, I might have gotten violent. I lost my mind when I was late for work because my colleague asked me to cover their shift and gave me the wrong time, and it was my fault from the company's perspective. This happened in some club ages ago. I was bouncing around on the dance floor with everybody else and apparently stepped on some dude's foot who had been standing there with this posse of 2 or 3 other guys watching people. I shrugged and apologized, then turned around to leave. Right then, quote, somebody smacked me in the back of the head. Not hard, but too hard to ignore. I turned around still calm and said something like, look, I'm gonna walk this way, you guys stay here and nothing more needs to happen. Turned around again, got smacked in the head again. I was very much ticked off at that point. It didn't help that they looked at me all innocent. I couldn't even tell which one of them did it. So I just stuck my finger in the face of the dude whose foot I allegedly stepped on and recommended he don't do that again. Turned around once more, waiting to get smacked in the head again. This time, they poured a glass of beer in my back. That's when I completely lost my mind. Threw myself around and went straight at the guy. I was in full rage mode, didn't care what happened next as long as that guy suffered. I could tell by the terrified look on his face he realized he had gone too far. His friends never stepped in to help him. After a while, people separated us and that was that. I have no sympathy at all for people who resort to violence for solving their problems, but feel no shame for having snapped in that situation. I think I did everything in my power to avoid what eventually happened. So, earlier this year, my health insurance got messed up. I started making too much money to qualify for my state's Medicare, so healthcare.gov requested a notification from NJ Family Care to confirm I wasn't on it anymore. So in January, I called them to get said notification. They say, yeah, you should get it in a couple of weeks. It never comes. Unfortunately, I had forgotten about it until healthcare.gov sends me a message that they're going to raise my insurance costs if I don't get them the message in the next 2 weeks. So I call NJ Family Care again and explain to them the situation. They once again claim they're going to send me the notice and don't. So now, after getting an extension from healthcare.gov about this, I call up NJ Family Care once more and attempt to explain the situation, politely requesting the cancellation notice. But the woman on the phone gets an attitude with me, saying some stupid stuff like, you know this is the cancellation department, right? And I lost my mind. What is your problem? I don't understand why you can't just send me this stupid letter. What's happening over there? Just look in the file and cancel it. Yes, you dog. I know this is the cancellation department. I want a notice that it's canceled. I must have scared the crap out of her because the next thing she said was, I'll go get my supervisor, who solved the problem in 10 minutes, and I got my cancellation notice 3 days later. My friend is bad with math. I was explaining a thing once. It took 10 minutes. He tells me he doesn't get it. So I sit there and explain this thing more deeply. Took 30 minutes. He's like, takes in-ear headphones out of ear. He was covering it with his hand. Oh, sorry, I wasn't listening to you. Found this amazing radio recently. I lost my mind. I worked at a diner with an open kitchen. You can see us, and we can see you. I'm the only cook during the lunch rush when I hear a lady shout, "Hey!" I look over, and a lady sitting in a booth points at me and then does a very condescending come here motion with her finger. I thought something was wrong with her food, so I decide I could run out of the kitchen, leaving 4 orders on the grill, and see what I need to fix. She has no food on her table. She holds her blue soda cup out to me and asks, "What is this?" Excuse me? Why is my root beer in a soda cup and not a mug? I don't know, I'm just the cook. Oh great, another freaking idiot in this freaking place who doesn't know anything. She then proceeds to chew me out because I, the cook, do not know why the server gave her root beer in a cup. We have special root beer mugs, but the servers couldn't find them. Someone misplaced them. I apologize and head back into the kitchen while she's loudly talking crap about me to the next booth to find out that all of my orders are ruined and more have been coming in. It's already stressful working in a kitchen, and that was the last straw. I went in back, started screaming and kicking the crap out of the walk-in cooler. When I went back out, everyone was quiet and avoided eye contact, even the lady with the issues. Still looked pretty mad though. I rushed through the orders and thank God she left without saying anything. I didn't get in trouble though, since my manager was serving and had to deal with her as well. He understood. My friend, who is usually a chill person, had some girl make fun of her brother who was killed, and she ended up beating the crap out of her, smashing her face into the wall and getting kicked out of our school for it. Deserved. I was in charge of a rollover trainer once at a military training site. Think of a Humvee on an axle that spins, like a rollover accident. Part of the safety brief before anyone goes in is to empty their pockets of all items. Take any items on belts off. We have rubber items inside to simulate stuff flying. We do this for safety's sake. Part of the training is, we stop the trainer on its side/roof so the participants can get exposure to assisting the other passengers and exit the vehicle safely and quickly. It's been a long, boring as crap day, and like all good Army training, I am hungover and irritated. All officers, and they are listening for crap. We stop the exercise on the roof for a group, and they all exit except one who can't undo the seatbelt. I opened the door and reach in and placed my hand on a dual-edge 4-inch boot knife. I absolutely lost my mind. I saw red, my ears burned, and I distinctly remember seeing one of the other instructors mouth, "Oh crap." I chewed out every freaking officer there, all of whom outranked me, many of whom outranked my commander. Didn't matter, as my position was safety officer. I went on a tirade. I turn around after it was done, and my best friend is freaking recording it on his phone. That jerk showed that clip the rest of the week and for years after him. I miss that sucker every day. Update, sadly, that video is long gone, I imagine. Yes, I am former military, gladly retired. My son was maybe 8 months old and had recently been diagnosed as profoundly deaf. Deaf kids will often inhale to make vibrations and noise that they can somewhat, quote, hear for stimulation. We were on pins and needles as I had just lost my job, and our insurance and the cochlear implant surgery was going to cost us $170,000. We'd have to sell the house and one of the cars. We needed a break, and our in-laws took us to the food court at a local mall. Our boy started to inhale and gasp. "He needs a beating," a fat 20-something said, not so quietly to our friends at the table next to us. I rarely curse in public and am generally non-confrontational, but a stream of insulting profanity issued from my mouth for a good 10 minutes that would have put a sailor to shame. I found it couldn't stop, and I got on the verge of Bukowskian poetry. I insulted her, her mother, her weight, and her pinched-face friends. I launched into the smell of her genitalia, how fat she was, how she'd only be able to reproduce with a blind drunk moron with a death wish, as she was uglier than the devil's butthole on fire with the crap of heck. And it only progressed from there. F. Lee Ermey's Marine Drill Sergeant from Full Metal Jacket would have told me to tone it down a bit. I told her he was deaf and that we couldn't stop it, and this was a goddamn food court in a crappy southern town filled with crappy inbred, hellspawn, redneck, ignorant mutant troglodytes that embarrassed normal troglodytes. The food court was silent, and all the eyes were upon us. And then it progressed from there. She got up and left crying. I can honestly say the whole rant was involuntary, like a pus-filled boil popping and draining in a torrent. I had never done anything like this before and have not done it since. I feel bad for her to this day. My 7th freaking trip to the DMV when trying to reinstate my license. Every single time, they scrutinized my paperwork and always managed to find something wrong and would send me away to fix it. On this 7th trip, they finally resorted to, "You have no proof that you ever had a license," despite my piles of paperwork showing my driving record, among other things. I refused to lead the seat and said, "You people are monsters." A manager was called. We argued. He said he believed that I had had a license, but there was just no proof, and he couldn't risk accepting my paperwork in case someone checked it. I said I refused to lead the seat until I knew exactly what was needed. Manager said, "Tell you what, I can contact last state I lived in and can get a verification that I had had a license there. It would take 3 minutes. That's when I yelled in the DMV, "Why wasn't that the first thing you said?" Anyway, I got my license back. I grew up on a farm, and one day, several cows decided that since their head could fit through a small hole in a gate, then their whole body could fit through a small hole in a gate. This resulted in a broken gate, a cow stuck in the broken gate, several cows roaming freely in a field after escaping through the broken gate, and me absolutely losing my mind. I now work in IT. Cows are dumb. Username Recovering Farmer checks out. In 6th grade, a group of some 4 kids took monopoly of the back of the bus, a true power move. I always minded my own business and tried to sit away from them. For one, they all didn't understand basic hygiene and smelled even though they were older than me. Anyway, turns out the bus driver was their quiet retired grandpa who would never tell them to stop bullying or doing dumb crap. So one time, they have a freaking spitting war. As in, they spit across the seats at each other as they jump seats for cover. At one point, I was the seat in the middle, and a giant wad of their disgusting spit hit me square in my face. I then proceeded to take my Pearson history book, one of those big, heavy, hardcover textbooks, and smash them over the head with it. Granted, this was me telling them to stop their nonsense several times. The spitting stopped after that. Anyway, the book cover cracked and I had to pay for it at the end of the year, but I regret nothing. This guy at work was, quote, cleaning out the work break room. Basically, he was throwing out people's personal belongings. So, I see my new coffee mug I bought specifically for work in the trash and lost my mind. I started yelling at him that what he was doing was morally wrong and it's not his stuff to throw out. I went to my HR manager and complained to him about the principle of the thing. I took all the coffee mugs in the trash out and washed them. The good thing is, if you are a calm person 99% of the time, people are more likely to listen to you in the 1% of moments you lose it. Exactly. I used to waitress and never caused any drama. I was there to make money for my wedding. I showed up on time, didn't take smoke breaks, never on my phone, and rolled with the punches. The 2 best compliments of my life came from my manager. One was him thanking me for not making him know my fiance's name. I never had problems to deal with at work like the other girls, and I didn't chit-chat. And when all heck was breaking loose, he called me his calm little Hindu calf, which still makes me laugh. Anyway, this jerk of a cook wouldn't stop calling me pet names and trying to touch me. Every time I said loudly and clearly, "Don't touch me," and "My name isn't Sweetheart, it's Hopeful Kitty." Everyone knew how I felt, and they tried to tell me, "That's just how he is, let it go." I told them that the way I am is that I don't want him to touch me. When the manager talked to him, he'd stop for a few weeks, then start again. After months of this, I told the manager if it didn't stop, I was going to file a harassment complaint. Manager talked to the owner and asked if he'd rather have the cook or me because I was on the verge of quitting, and they agreed they'd rather have me 100 times over this dude. He was gone by the next day, and I got an escort to my car every night. Turns out, if you are drama-free and calm, people really listen when you have a problem. I lost it on a nurse in a nursing home once in my fire/EMS days. We ran a call there at 8 a.m., and she said she had just got there and didn't know anything about the patient or their condition. Alright, plausible enough. Run there again at 11 a.m., same nurse, same story. Okay, fine, maybe you haven't had enough time to actually catch up on your patients. We're annoyed at this point, but keeping our crap to ourselves. 1:30 p.m. rolls around, and we get another call to the same place. Same nurse. Exact same response as the first 2 times. I lost my cool and started yelling at her in the hallway outside the patient's room. I was livid. How have you been here for at minimum 5.5 hours and still don't have any info on any other patient? It was absolutely unacceptable, and I let her know that in no uncertain terms. She called my chief and I got yelled at for verbally harassing a nurse. 3 months later, we get a call to the same place for an 85-year-old woman with an altered mental status. We get there, it's the same nurse. Yet again, same bullcrap answer that she didn't know the status, but stated that a tech had checked in on the woman 15 minutes ago. We go in the room and this woman is dead. Like, dead. Full rigor, emptied bowels, the works. We tell her this and she panics and runs in and starts CPR. We're like, no, she dead. Obvious signs of death and there is no working this patient. She was fired the next day.
What are the cons of being attractive? You don't know if someone likes you for you or just how you look. They come for the looks and stay for you, I guess. Not always. That's definitely one of the downsides of physical attractiveness. Sometimes people will think they know you, but they don't. And when they discover that you're not just who they imagined you to be, some don't even care who you really are. They just wanted that made-up version and are disappointed when that's not you. This isn't an issue I have anymore as an adult, likely because I know how to handle myself professionally. But in my teens, I had a side job as a mover, and the amount of clients who would be surprised that I was about to graduate with honors and go to prestigious university. It was likely a combination of being just a mover, but also being decently attractive and very physically fit. People project a lot of bullcrap onto you, all from their own heads. Pretty? You must be dumb. Pretty and articulate? First they're shocked, then you're a B-word who has too much self-esteem. Shy and pretty? You must be stuck up. Outgoing and pretty? Who do you think you are, you bossy B-word, clearly chasing after other women's boyfriends? Great figure? You must be a hussy. Great skin? You've probably had work done. Dress well? You waste your whole salary on clothes. Too skinny? You're mentally ill. They armchair diagnose you with anorexia. In a relationship? You're clearly a gold digger. Single? Then you're either a hussy who is playing the field, or you're a snob who thinks you're too good for anyone. You have to work overtime to appear friendly and ease everyone's insecurities. It's fricking exhausting. I wish I could upvote this 1,000,000 times. I can relate so hard to all of these, and there's nobody I can talk to about any of this, because how do you get to complain about being too attractive? People doubt if you're into nerdy stuff as much as you might say. Plus, a lot of your actions just have all these preconceived notions. People think you don't have any problems or struggles. And we've touched upon the problem of the notion of the fake gamer girl, where people are apparently so convinced that people are single-faceted that they can't accept that someone might have more elements to them than their physical appearance. This comment had some interesting follow-ups. Oh, I totally agree to this. I'm a fairly attractive woman, and when I tell people I'm a software consultant in biotech, they almost negatively judge me? Or there's often the, wow, beauty and brains, huh? comment. Like, yes, just because I'm pretty, it doesn't mean I'm stupid. What the frick? I guess it's just a mixture of one or the other and possibly some envy. You have physical looks and intellectual prowess. That can definitely make some folks seethe with inferiority. That's really their problem, though. Plus the impossible dance you must do. Smart but not intimidating. Friendly but not flirtatious. Helpful but not the office assistant. Talkative but not opinionated. And serious but not abrasive. The list goes on. I'm a woman in finance who's decently attractive, at least fit and plain enough to not be considered ugly, and it's an impossible balance to strike. People seem okay to openly suggesting that everything I have, like an education and fitness and a happy marriage, I lucked into. It feels really difficult to toe the many lines. People feel the need to compete with you, find something that makes you look bad, or show fault. One or two co-workers, same gender, jealous, competitive types, will set out to sabotage your success and your relationships with other people when you're just minding your own business and trying to do a good job. You're the immediate target for psychopath types. I think everyone gets that, not only attractive people. As someone who's been both, it's not the same. When you're attractive, lots of the time people of the same sex or gender will view you as a social and sexual threat to them, and act accordingly. These people are usually just super insecure about themselves. Somehow, being kind automatically equals being flirtatious or interested. People don't think attractive people struggle with their mental health, constantly being shamed or mocked out of jealousy, and people praying for your downfall. This. Oh my god, this. Anytime I talk to a male coworker, all the ladies will rush after and say the guy has a huge crush on me or his face lights up when you talk to him. I'm honestly just talking to people, male and female, to actually have a conversation. I'm not flirting and there's no intention on my side. I'm just conversing, people. So frustrating. Loneliness. Friends of the same gender avoid you because they're afraid their partners will want you. Opposite gender only want one thing. My best friend in high school became threatened at some point when the pretty scale tipped in my favor. It had always been in her favor. I feel gross saying this, by the way. I don't consider myself a conceited person. It didn't help that her mother even made comments, urging my friend to stop hanging out with me, not to let her boyfriends meet me. It was so dumb. Years later, I realized they were just shallow and toxic. But yeah, some women will just not like you until you reach middle age. I'm pretty okay talking to girls in general, but then there are the bombshells, 10 out of 10. And there's just something so intimidating about them, and I don't know why. I just can't make decent conversations, at least not at first. I'd imagine it happens a lot to them, and must be quite awkward and weird when you just want to have a normal conversation with people. Creeps. As a below-average looking woman, I can actually tell you that creeps creep on ugly women too. This is the unfortunate reality that is perpetuated online, mostly unknowingly. People assuming it's mainly attractive people being stalked or something. It's become a large documented thing in Me Too when people believed almost every claim since the actresses were mostly young and conventionally beautiful. But most indecent conduct isn't some creep following you or picking out attractive women. A large majority is done by someone you're close to or related to, in which case it's more about a power dynamic than conventional attractiveness. As someone who's been both young and hot and fat and frumpy, I found that the more conventionally attractive you are, the worse it is. Hot me was harassed every time I traveled home alone at night, and frumpy me enjoyed blissful invisibility. Not only the unwanted attention goes away, people are also less likely to help you or give you free stuff. There's a danger in taking on topics like this of suggesting any one group, in this case the conventionally attractive, have things better or worse than the rest. Hopefully, small conversations like the one I just quoted can highlight the unfairness that will affect people at all levels of perceived aesthetic value. The next comment summarizes one recurring theme in this thread quite succinctly. People can like you way too much or hate your guts with a burning passion really quickly based off nothing. Jogged my memory of a time when I was attending my cousin's Halloween birthday party. My cousin, drunk as a skunk as he should be, ended up smashing a bottle or glass, and I was cleaning it up. Another guy came over to give me a hand. Well, I guess his girlfriend, who I'd never met prior, too noticed and felt a way about it and targeted me the entire night. She kept taking jabs or making random comments about me. The solid proof of her raging, whatever she was on, was at the end of the night when they were leaving and she said goodbye to everyone and pointed at me and said, "But not you. Some people truly just suck." Close friends repeatedly dropping you or even straight up ghosting you when they develop unreciprocated feelings for you and it gets too painful for them. I've got serious abandonment issues. Dating can be hard because people create an image of who they want you to be. It's even harsher if you're attractive and a complete weirdo. People act like you're doing something wrong when you break their perfect image, like you're taking something away from them and ruining a good thing. I can imagine it being a con if people think attractive people are only good for their looks and nothing else. If an attractive person is very accomplished, I feel like others would say they got help from being good-looking and that they didn't work that hard. In my experience, attractiveness became a crappy and unfulfilling value. At times when my self-esteem was low, I often clung on to being attractive as if it was all I had going for me, and developed a dependency on external validation and comparing myself to others. People who are or view themselves as less attractive than you treat you like garbage purely because they don't like that you're better looking than them. This one is especially true for women. Achievements that you make or respect you gain, such as getting a prestigious project at work, being put down by coworkers to the boss wanting to sleep with you. For the longest time, I would just lay in bed after work and just wonder why certain coworkers didn't like me. I knew that my personality can't possibly be compatible with everyone, but it bothered me that people I only interacted with in pleasant, passing little conversations treated me coldly anyway. As one example, I would pick up shifts at a location where this woman always made faces and snarky comments about the lunches I brought to work. "That doesn't look good, to be honest." Or, "That smells off. Are you really going to eat it?" I had no idea how to respond, and she would tend to ignore me if I talked to her anyway. It was like 10 years later when I finally realized that my small size might have had something to do with it, considering she was a large woman who constantly talked about weight. And that bothered me even more, to be honest, because I agonized for months over what was wrong with me, and it turns out it was my looks? It never occurred to me that it could be something as petty as that, but apparently it was important enough to her to make a nervous 20-year-old feel that much more uncomfortable. I'm treated like an idiot, presumed uneducated or naive, not taken seriously until I prove myself, and my absolute least favorite thing, I can't tell if I'm being pursued for my body or my character. I've also been stalked and the victim of attempted unspeakable acts, which supposedly has nothing to do with the way I look, but I've had the urge to completely change so people stop looking at me at all. People never seem to think the partners you choose look good enough, and it's exceptionally irritating that they even expect you to care. I like this point. As someone who's occasionally punched well above his weight when it comes to dating, I can say that in some cases, eventually you learn to look at the people who judge you lacking as a partner with amusement and disdain. Maybe that's just me, though. Girls saying they want to be friends, and then they get all moody when you're friendly and don't want to flirt back. Probably worse for women, but still. People manipulate and hide things from you because they either want to satisfy themselves or use you to attract and influence others. You can easily end up out of your depth and in bad relationships without the tools or power to escape. You also attract narcissists. I'm attractive enough that I ended up dating a multimillionaire. She turned out to be controlling and violent and trapped me into a lease that I couldn't afford to leave, all because she liked that I was intimidatingly attractive. I won't make that mistake again. I was unattractive for the beginning of my life into my teens, then around my sophomore year, I became fairly attractive, lost weight, started taking care of myself, etc. The difference in the way people treated me was one of the worst things ever. Everyone was so nice, giving me so much attention, men especially. Once you realize how important looks are to social standing, your life changes a lot in a bad way. My senior year, I had gained all the weight back and all of that attention was gone. Now that I'm 27, I'm still very overweight, but I've learned how to be more confident and comfortable with myself and have attracted attention from people that actually care about me and not how I look. But it's a total mind frick for sure. My first summer job was in tech support. One of my co-workers was one of those human beings you'd just be in awe of if you met them. She was brilliant, Dean's List, biomed student, skipped a grade in school, and also unbelievably pretty. Gymnast turned varsity cheerleader. We had virtually no work to do and just kind of goofed around watching movies or chatting about stuff. Some of the things I remember her telling me about at the time were male friendships not feeling genuine because they were waiting to swoop in once she was single, finding it hard to be taken seriously for her intelligence sometimes, creeps, unwanted attention in public, not directly, but the sense that outside her family and a small group of her very trusted friends, that she might have felt like friendships were superficial. I just derived that from the cheerleader drama stories she shared. I was 18 and had just finished first year of uni as a socially awkward kid anyways, so none of this made sense to me, but looking back I learned a lot from her about stuff like that. People automatically assume that you're swimming in romantic prospects and oftentimes take up a bitter attitude to you for it. The worst I've encountered, while attending a party with a friend and an ex-girlfriend, one Italian girl suddenly stared at me for several minutes. Then later on she went to talk a bit to my ex and said, "I cannot believe he's your boyfriend, he's so handsome." What the frick? Then she came back at me while I was talking with my friends and waited there for maybe 15 minutes, staring at me, trying to talk to me. I didn't know at this point why she went up to my girlfriend and I was feeling something was really off, so I've only really looked at her once in this and never really answered her. She left later on and then I've learned what she said to my girlfriend. These people aren't the worst, I mean they're not murderers or anything, but in my opinion they really suck as human beings because they do not realize the damages they can do with such small talk and behavior. You're never left alone in public. If you do something weird, people are much more likely to notice. But it's far more acceptable to be weird when you're attractive. Being weird as an attractive person is seen as quirky. Headphones. Always. You can't admit how much effort it takes for a huge component of attractiveness. Fitness. So you just have to let people think that you're lucky to be so thin and that it's not a deliberate effort to get sleep, prioritize health, etc. I'm not attractive necessarily, but I'm fit at an age where many of my peers are convinced that getting fat and frumpy is automatic, and it's hard to navigate. I've tried not to counteract what some of these people say so as to not taint their perspective, but I will weigh in as a man of average to low looks but a weird metabolism. Some of us can do no exercise and eat junk food for a year and still look pretty lean and muscular, even if in reality we're kind of weak. So I say the last point isn't universal, but maybe slightly more at an older age. I knew a girl in college who was stunning and smart. She was a med student, and she also had a large chest. She could not have a normal relationship with anyone, women or men. Women were highly jealous, and men couldn't talk to her face. I imagine it made her feel intensely lonely. Overweight most of my adult life. Wife and I lost a lot of weight together, and are now in fairly good shape. I never get used to hugs from the women in our social circle. Now I get a lot of attention and greetings hugs. It's a weird change. Wife is wearing more dresses, nothing overly sexy, just very attractive. I noticed most guys we meet watching her walk away or looking her over. We're very committed to each other, so it's not a worry, just weird to have the attention. People stop taking you seriously. It takes far more effort to get a salient point across. Depending if this is a con for you, extra attention. Quite frankly, if you're a woman, it's more difficult to be taken seriously at work, since people will think you're just a pretty face. Conversely, if you're in a client role, you may be put in front of the client more often because of your looks. If you're male, good-looking and semi-competent, you'll be promoted through the ranks very quickly, which is a huge pro. In general, regardless of gender, being good-looking does create tension within your gender and social circles, social interactions because you're viewed as competition in the dating pool. People only like the chase. 3 of my relationships eventually faded out because I was sick of hearing, "You're so pretty," and they know nothing of me as a person. I wanted quality time. I wanted someone to know me as a person. They ended up saying, "You're too nice, you're so caring, I don't deserve you," and it ended. I felt used. At the start of relationships, they go out of their way to do such special nice things for you. They're in it for the chase only. Definitely creeps. In the same vein, I cannot stand staring. It's a cultural thing, but subconsciously, I take it as a threat or challenge. Also, you can get more dates with anyone you want, but 99% of them only want to be physical, not to actually date you as a relationship material. You start to wonder if your personality is the problem. Friends of the opposite gender just don't exist. When I was ugly or overweight, child, teen, I had tons of male friends. As an adult, I've had guys end friendships with me once they found out I wasn't single, or when they decide I'm worth nothing beyond my aesthetic appeal. If they can't do the deed with me, then they want nothing to do with me, other than to stalk my Instagram. I'm sick of, "Men can't be friends with women." No, you just don't see my value beyond my reproductive organs. Being tempered and propositioned by people that didn't care that I was married, engaged, or in relationships themselves. It planted a seed that people are not as loyal as the perception they tell their significant others, and I brought it home at one point into my marriage. As a man, when someone much younger wants you, it can be intoxicating, and that temptation can be hard to control. Furthermore, when you reject some of these ladies, they go from wanting to screw you at first sight to mean and nasty and full of name-calling just because you won't cheat. Those good-looking people can be hiding evil minds. The older and less attractive I get, the better people in general seem to treat me. When I was young, late teens to early 20s, women were nasty and men wanted me for one reason and one reason only, which is also nasty. I was subject to some pretty unsavory behavior and called degrading names. When you're treated nicely, it's for ulterior motives. Now, I get along with other women, and nobody is unnecessarily and inexplicably nasty to me, and I've actually made decent male friends. Nobody has tried to screw me for social points in years. In general, people take me more seriously and make far less assumptions about my personality and my background. When you're attractive, people tend to assume that everything else in your life is or has been great too, and I swear they used to imagine me living on daddy's yacht, sunbathing, and only lifting a finger to go shopping, based on the assumptions people used to make about me and the way they treated me. I had a few older men call me princess and act like I needed to be taught lessons about hard work and friendship, which was infuriating because my family was homeless when I was growing up, and I've been working since I was 14. But when you're pretty, people take one look at you and ask, "What would you know?" Overall, people behave very strangely around people they view as conventionally attractive, and they make a lot of assumptions. There's a lot of bias, and that is a massive con. People almost never accurately judged me as a person. I felt like many people looked at me, but nobody actually saw me. Getting older has been a relief. People ask me actual questions about who I am and where I come from now. Far less people look at me, but I feel more seen than I ever did as an attractive young woman. I can't wait to turn 40. Now that I work in a female-dominated environment, I take extra care to make the younger, beautiful women feel seen and not just looked at. I like this approach of using your experience from both sides of the perceived aesthetic aisle and using it to empathize with those who suffer from the undue prejudices of society. People think your feelings can't be hurt. They assume your confidence is at a 100 and they can criticize your whole look without ever hurting you. Or maybe they want to hurt you for it. And it's difficult to get people to listen to the content of what you're saying. And you can say something insanely profound and be hit with, "Well, you're too pretty to worry about such things." The assumptions people make, that's the sucky part. You're more likely to experience manipulation or be outright preyed upon. For women, people won't take you seriously, and if you marry an unattractive guy with money, you'll probably be seen as a trophy wife by others. Other girls may find you threatening. If you have a friend of the opposite gender, their partner may find you threatening. My job has put me in positions with female models, and the main things I've noticed are a lot of people neg them. It's like they can't imagine this beautiful person can be nice or smart, so they constantly chip away at them, and many times it works. Being attractive doesn't bring down the cost of bacon. Getting constantly hit on by a gender you're not into. Boyfriend and I are both decent looking and straight, and 80% of people who hit on us are the same gender as us. We both give off gay vibes without trying, I guess. I'm not even that attractive, and yet going to clubs and stuff gives me the ick. Like, I love dancing and hanging out with my friends, but I'm so sick of creeps trying to grab me, or just following me around, or whatever. If I'm on a night out these days, I usually only go to clubs and bars if I'm with a mixed group of friends of guys and girls. Because as soon as it's just girls, random guys seem to think it's an invitation to get all up in our faces. Usually they leave me alone if I'm also with male friends, but even then, it doesn't always work. I just want to be able to dance without being grabbed or touched.
What's the most insane coincidence you've experienced? Here before the comments are filled with, that's not real, that didn't happen. I'm just reading what's on the thread, man. Cut me some slack. I was once mugged by 4 guys on one of the main shopping streets of Nairobi, Kenya. One of the guys had me in a chokehold, and just before I was about to pass out, they dropped me and ran. At the time, I didn't know why. 12 months later, sitting on a beach on an island in Thailand, I meet a British couple who did business in Kenya, and we start to talk about how dangerous it was getting for foreigners. They described an incident the year before of turning a corner and seeing a white guy being mugged and a shopkeeper who rescued him by hitting one of them over the head with a bat. They were in the street on the same day at the exact same time I was there. It was me who they witnessed being mugged. What are the odds of randomly meeting up on a beach in Thailand a year later? I live in Australia, and I have for almost my whole life, but I was born in Dubai. Every weekend in Dubai, my mom would take me to the Hilton Beach Club and sit me in front of the pastry chef and eat. We moved away from Dubai really early on, so I don't even remember much. Fast forward to 17 years of age, a new kid at school had just moved from a nearby town. We became friends, and we both loved cricket, and we practiced a lot together. My dad and I were giving him a lift home after we were practicing, and Dad asks, "Where were you born?" And he says, "Dubai." And the conversation continues, and I say I was too, etc. Then he says, "My parents used to be the pastry chefs at the Hilton Beach Club." And this blew me away. Here we were, 16 years later, halfway across the world, and every weekend I sat in front of his parents and ate what they made for me. To this day, I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I mean, what are the chances? A few years ago, I got into a cab heading out for the evening in downtown Toronto. Shortly after being dropped off, I realized I left my phone in the cab. I tried calling it with no luck. I called the cab company, but because I had flagged the cab and paid cash, they had no real way of knowing which cab I was in. I figured the phone was as good as done and went about my night. Many hours later, and having moved around the city quite a bit, I am ready to call it a night. So, flag another cab. Sitting in the back seat, I start to think the driver looks familiar and realize that I'm in the same cab I took earlier. He hasn't found a phone, but I start looking anyways, and sure enough, there it is, jammed in the seat. Me and my flip phone were happily reunited, only for me to put it in a washing machine 2 days later. Wop, 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 wop. I have a similar story. I was going to a My Chemical Romance and Blink-182 concert back in college. I went with a couple of friends, and we got a hotel nearby Jiffy Lube Live in order to get plastered. I got some Wendy's on the way to the concert to eat in the parking lot beforehand, but left it in the taxi. I was drunkenly devastated. After the concert, we hail a cab and I get in, feel a brown paper bag at my feet, and look down. That beautiful ginger on the bag was smiling up at my inebriated eyes as if to say, "I knew you'd come back." An American friend of mine by the name of Tom took his family on vacation to check out Antarctica. He met an Australian guy named Paul on Christmas Day in Antarctica. They didn't exchange contact info. A year later, Christmas Day, they take their vacation to Machu Picchu. He's looking down at a map when he hears, "Hey Tom, how the heck are ya?" It was Paul, taking his family on their annual trip as well. Never could explain this payphone incident. Saturday night out with friends, we decide to call my friend Al to see if he wants to join us. This was in England long before mobile phones, so we had to use one of the iconic red phone booths. Someone was already using it, so we had to wait a few minutes. Guy leaves and we cram in the booth. Now, in those days, in order to make a call, you would first get a dial tone, then call the number. When the person answered, you would hear a bunch of beeps, at which point you insert the coins. So I pick up the phone, but hear no dial tone. I hang the phone up and try again. Still no dial tone. Seems to be still connected to the previous call. I say hello to see if anyone is still on the line. Person answers, "Hello?" It was my friend Al. He had just picked up his phone to make a call, and somehow, Miraculously, without even dialing his number, we were connected. We all went to the pub after and tried to figure out how the heck this happened, but it remains a mystery. If I did not have my friends with me at the time as witnesses, I would have believed it was my mind playing tricks on me. In 2004, I was 18 and on a 3-week tour of Europe. I was at the Louvre and had just experienced the cluster that was the Mona Lisa exhibit. After looking at it for 2 minutes, I started to wander around aimlessly. As I was walking, an older couple asked if I knew how to get to the Mona Lisa exhibit. I told them yes, and because I'm horrible with directions, I'd be happy to walk them there myself. They were really nice and very appreciative that I was taking the time to help them. They asked me where I was from, US in Nashville, but I mentioned my parents were immigrants from Italy. They told me they were from Portugal on anniversary. We talked a bit more, told them my name, and they were really excited about it since I shared the same name as their grandchild. Anyways, we get to the exhibit, and I go to part ways and shake their hands, but get pulled in for 2 massive hugs and a kiss on the cheek. They give me their address and say anytime I'm in Portugal to stop by and I'll have a place to stay and eat. We take a group photo and leave. 7 years later, I'm in Munich for Oktoberfest. I'm standing outside my hotel waiting for my friends when an older couple asks if I know how to get to the fairgrounds. Again, I'm crap with directions, so since I'm headed there, I tell them they can just follow me and my friends. Again, we start talking about where we all are from. Now, I have a memory like an elephant, and once they mention they're from Portugal, I start to think maybe these are the same people. I ask them if they have grandkids, and they say they have 6. I ask if one of their names is History of a Man. They look at each other sort of surprised and say yes. They ask, how do I know that? And tell them that I had met them 7 years prior in Paris at the Louvre. The old lady gets really happy and starts crying and starts to hug me. They say they remember me now and asked why I never came to visit, that they had our picture in a frame on their wall and always wondered what happened to the nice American boy. We spent the next 3 hours drinking beers and catching up. Luckily, we got there early, so we were able to get an empty table, and they bought all the beers the entire time. This time, they demanded I give them my email so we could keep in contact. I even added their son on Facebook. 2 years later, I go and visit for the summer, and sure enough, there on the wall amongst the rest of their family pictures is 18-year-old me standing between them. I'll tell you all something. I'm a bit of an introvert and can be awkward when meeting new people, simply because I like to get a feel for who they are and where their boundaries are. But never in my life, other than with my own family, and maybe not even then, have I ever felt more at home and that I belonged than the 3 weeks I spent with them. We still talk weekly. It's like having a second family. In high school, my friend set me up with their boyfriend's cousin. Let's call him Jack. Jack and I were walking around an amusement park and started talking about recent family spring break vacations. Turns out, both Jack and I had been in Las Vegas during the same week. We stayed at the same hotel. The conversation changed subjects when Jack stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and said, "I saw you in Las Vegas." I thought he was full of crap. There's no way he would remember some random girl among the thousands of people there. He told me the exact place he saw me and that my sister and I were posing for a photo. We got back to my house and found the picture. There were Jack and his brother in the background. When I was in grade 2, our family moved from Manitoba to Arizona for a year due to a contract my dad was working. We rented out the house fully furnished for the year. While in Arizona, we flew to Alberta one weekend. On the flight from Arizona to Alberta, I sat beside a boy my age and we started talking. It went something like this. Me, what city are you from? Him, Winnipeg. Me too. What school do you go to? School name. Cool. I used to go there too. What street do you live on? Street name. I lived on that street. It turns out his family was renting our house while we were gone, so I was sitting beside the boy who was sleeping in my bed while we were in Arizona. When I was 13, I was on a family holiday in Venice. We were on a gondola touring the waterways of the city. We got halfway down a long passageway, and another gondola passes us by, carrying a man and a woman. The man and my dad lock eyes, exclaim one another's name, and have a quick handshake as our gondolas pass. Myself, brother, and mother sit quietly, pretty stunned, while the woman on the other boat explodes with, "What? Who's that? How do you know him?" We floated off in the other direction, comparatively swag and chill. Turns out it was a guy my dad went to university with and hadn't seen him since. They haven't even contacted one another since. It's crazy they recognized one another, considering they were both in their late 40s now, passing fleetingly on 2 gondolas in Venice. About 10 years ago, I tried to get into Six Flags with a tiny keychain Swiss Army knife. It literally had a dull 1-inch blade. They told me I could either throw it away, take it to my car a mile away, or rent a locker for like $10. So I decided to hide it in the planter. I looked down and saw a big piece of bark laying in the dirt and figured it would be a good hiding place. I picked it up and found another mini Swiss Army knife. I placed mine next to the first and went into the park. When I returned, the other knife was gone and a smiley face was etched into the dirt in its place. I went to a concert in Dallas and took 2 lawn chairs. They wouldn't let me bring them in, so being 6'5", I threw them on top of a very tall bush. No one would have even seen them, and hardly anyone will be able to reach them. As I'm pulling them down after the concert, I pulled down 4 of the exact same chair. I only brought 2 though. Up walks a guy who is as tall as I am, wearing the exact same Blink-182 tour shirt from 2009, and the other 2 chairs were his. It was pretty wild. We smoked a doob, did a tall guy high five, then parted ways. My family used to take little summer vacations. One summer, I was about 7 or 8. We stayed at a campground about 4 hours from home. There were a bunch of kids there, and one day we all started playing tag. I was it and was chasing another young boy, and when I tagged him, I pushed him too hard and he fell and broke his arm. I remember the scene vividly. Fast forward to college. I became good friends with my neighbor in the dorm, and we ended up getting a place together our sophomore year. The following year, no longer living together, we went out for a few beers and the topic of broken bones came up. I've only broken 1 bone, and it was my arm when I was 7. Some kid at a campground pushed me over while playing tag. It was me. Still can't believe it. Now is as great a time as any to recommend the movie Tag starring Jeremy Renner. It's really funny, and if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's based off of a true story of these guys who had a tag gang going for like 30 years. And there are so many different crazy ways they all tagged each other. And it's got a surprisingly emotional message. One time I parked, without even noticing, next to a car with the same license plate as me. I had a Massachusetts plate, she had a New Hampshire plate, both with the same 5-digit number. The weirder thing was that both of us had kept the plate as a novelty plate because the state wasn't making 5-digit plate numbers anymore, but a family member wanted to keep it. In my case, my dad wanted to keep his dad's plate. My first semester of college, I moved out of state. I was first to move into the apartment and had a few days to myself. After orientation, I found my new roommate sitting on his bed. When I introduced myself, he asked where I was from. When I told him, he said, "I used to have a friend named Simon." I said I used to have a friend named Will. We were best friends in 1st and 2nd grade until his family moved. When I was in high school, I was aimlessly playing around our library one day. Like any large public high school, our library had literally thousands of books quietly tucked away in shelves and rarely, if ever, touched. That day, I pulled a book at random from a shelf in the back and sat down to read it. After opening it, a slip of paper fell out, and I quickly recognized the dashed 10 digits written on it as a phone number. I hastily read the number, and it was my older sister's number, who had graduated my high school years earlier. Someone wrote her number and tucked it away into a random book in the back until I found it years later. My great-grandmother fainted when my mother told her she was getting married to my dad because my great-grandmother had gotten engaged to a guy with the same name as my dad, and both men had been stationed at the same fort. But great-grandmother's fiancé died. Fortunately, mom's fiancé did not. This one's a long one, so strap in. I once went camping with about 5 or so other friends. This was about 3 years ago now in Pisgah National Forest in the mountains of North Carolina. There are some amazing waterfalls in this area, one called Rainbow Falls. It's about 125 feet from river above to ground below. If you keep hiking past Rainbow Falls, there is a much smaller waterfall in the river above Rainbow Falls called Turtleback Falls. It's basically a very slippery rock with water running over it, which ends with about a 4 to 5 foot drop. This is really cool because you can climb up it using a rope someone attached to a tree above, walk out to the middle of the rock, and slide down. There's also another spot that's about a third of the way up the side of Rainbow Falls where you can climb up some branches, then basically rappel down a rock face, shimmy out on a ledge, and jump about 30 to 40 feet into the nice, deep pool in the river at the bottom of the waterfall. It was when my friends and I had climbed out on the ledge and were about to jump when we noticed that there was another group of people hanging out in the river below us. They started cheering us on and encouraging us to jump, as it is slightly terrifying. Anyways, we ended up jumping, and once in the river below, we talked to the other group of people. They seemed pretty cool. Fast forward 1 year, we had so much fun a year earlier that we decided to go back again. This time, we camped a little further down the river, and we decided to climb on some rocks downriver from the waterfall, about 300 or 400 yards from the waterfall. I was climbing on one rock and found something that looked like a strap of some kind. Assuming it was trash, I didn't touch it, but when I pointed it out to one of my friends, he noticed it was actually a GoPro camera in a waterproof case, so we decided to keep it. Fast forward a couple days, my friend and I purchased a charger for that type of camera and decided to see what was on it. We start watching the video and see some guys climbing up the place where we jumped off the side of the waterfall in front of the cameraman who was also climbing. The cameraman starts to get closer, and we see something that made us instantly start to freak out. On the back left shoulder of the person in front of the cameraman was the exact tattoo that my friend has. When it gets even closer, we realize that the person on camera was my friend who I was currently sitting right beside. Later, the cameraman gets up to the ledge and we see me and the rest of my friends from over a year ago. There are also some pictures and videos of us jumping from the ledge. We watched the rest of the video in a stunned state, and the last 30 minutes or so of footage is of the cameraman going up to the river above Rainbow Falls and sliding on Turtleback Falls, apparently losing his GoPro in the water after going over the falls. The camera sinks to the bottom, and you can even see fish swimming by and staring at the camera. Now, think about where we found the camera 400 to 500 yards downriver from the bottom of the large waterfall. So apparently, this camera made its way downriver over a 125-foot waterfall and got lodged in a rock 500 yards away, and my friends and I found it a year later with video footage of us from the previous year on it. It took us a little while to decide on this as being the most reasonable explanation. Edit. A lot of people are wondering if I knew the cameraman. The answer is no, I did not. I suspect he was one of the people I mentioned being at the bottom of the river while we were about to jump. We jumped off this rock multiple times, so he might have followed us up one of the times, although I don't specifically remember this. As a college sophomore, I went on a trip to France by myself. I was sitting in Notre Dame Cathedral listening to music when a girl I dated in high school sat down near me, totally at random. We were both speechless when we saw one another there, out of the blue, in a foreign country within a vast cathedral. All while Quasimodo looked down sadly, knowing his only love forever out of reach. This coincidence is straight up sorcery. Was kayaking with my family along a river, when I thought I would pull a fast one on my brother. So I yell, "Hey look, a bald eagle!" to my brother so I can do the whole "made you look" game, but to my surprise, he goes, "Cool." At this point, I think he's just messing with me, so I can't say the whole "made you look" thing. So then I look up, and a bald eagle swoops down, catches a fish, and flies to the other side of the river. One of the most magical coincidences ever. I'm an American who moved to Amsterdam some years ago, and my first year there on a random Saturday, I decided to head out for a drink. Sat down next to a cute German guy who was in town for the first time from 6 hours away, helping a friend move kind of thing, and it turns out he's doing a PhD in physics. I'm doing mine in astronomy and have a physics background, so we spent maybe 10 minutes discussing our research topics when he mentions offhand how he used to study in New Zealand. I get a confused look and then get all excited. "Johan, Professor W's E&M class in Auckland, first half of 2007. Freaked him out until I explained. I was a semester abroad student in Auckland that year, and not only were we in this same class, we even did homeworks together and such, but lost touch once I left the country, with no one having a clue what happened to the other, only to randomly run into each other 5 years later in a random bar in a random city on another continent. I don't know if I can ever top that one. It was pretty darn cool. I once burped 1 second before a power blackout in my neighborhood. It felt almighty. This happened to me a few months ago, and it was pretty darn improbable. I'm walking through Bay Area Rapid Transit. It's the train station that takes you to and from San Francisco and elsewhere, where an average of 375,000 people pass through daily. I walk up the escalator to my train and pass by an envelope lying on the ground. At first, I didn't think much of it, but I took a couple steps back to pick it up anyways. The next part freaked me out. I looked at the address, and it was addressed to me. I instantly look around to see if it was a practical joke or if I'm about to get assassinated or something. neither of those were the case. The sender was a family friend. We'll call them the Johnsons. I knew that Mr. Johnson took the BART daily, but I had never personally ran into him. After work, I call him up and ask him about the letter. Turns out, he had about 300 letters with him on the BART and was going to send them out for his daughter's graduation party. What in the world were the chances of him dropping the one letter addressed to me out of the 300, combined with the chances of me being the one out of 375,000 people to pick it up? Pretty wild. I met my now husband at work. Turns out there are enough coincidences that my mom is seriously wondering whether we are distantly related. We were born in the same hospital 2 weeks apart. We then both moved about 500 miles away and ended up in the same university together. We moved from there another 100 miles away and worked in the same company. We both have relatives in the same area in Dublin. We both have a relative that worked in the same hotel in Dublin at about the same time back in the 1930s. My mom and his grandmother had the exact same combination of unusual first and middle names, and I have the same birthday as his mom. We don't live in Ireland. Edit, when I say birthday, I mean month and day. I am not old enough to be his mom. Also, I'm pretty sure I would have remembered giving birth.
Health inspectors. What's the worst violation you've ever seen? Former inspector here, I once discovered a rat infestation in the kitchen of a hospital. They asked me if I could prove my suspicions, and I pointed out the numerous foodstuffs with 1 to 2 inch circular holes chewed in them, but they didn't seem convinced. I showed them the trail of droppings and footprints coming and going from a hole in the floor drain, but they still didn't seem convinced. I showed them the 3 dead rats I'd discovered under and around equipment. I think they began to believe me at that point. Citations included rat infestation and absolutely deplorable cleaning practices. Used to have a job working as an inspector for storage tanks at places like dairies and factories. Went to a cheesecake factory, an actual factory for cheesecakes, not the restaurant chain, to test a milk storage tank. It had just been cleaned and was being prepped to be filled with a tanker full of milk. I noticed the floor of the tank was covered in bleach. It turned out the floor manager couldn't be asked to spend the time sucking out the rest of the cleaning fluid used in the cleaning process and, as a standard, just filled the tank with milk on top of dozens of gallons of bleach. His theory was that there was enough milk to dilute the bleach to acceptable consumption levels. I wrote a report and he was promptly fired. By the way, my 12-gallon estimate is just that, an estimate. It was a huge milk storage silo, 40,000 litres if I recall, and roughly half an inch of the floor of the tank was covered in cleaning fluid. The dilutions we're talking about probably wouldn't have been harmful or even tasteable after being pasteurized and mixed with cheesecake ingredients. But that's also a guess, and it's also not the point. My gosh, you already went through the trouble of cleaning it. What the heck was an extra 5 minutes to properly finish the job? Glad he got fired. It was something to do with the extra attachment he'd need to use for the nozzle, or something. Either way, it would have been an extra 30 minutes of work. Something, had he observed, would have kept his job and a clean criminal record. In 2004, 2005, around that time, I drank some milk that had been in a similar situation. Machine wasn't rinsed after cleaning. I was a toddler and got hospitalized. How often does this crap happen? Worked in a restaurant. Sitting in the office one day, I hear an awful squeaking/shrieking noise. Took me a little while to find the source. The source turned out to be a mouse, stuck in some old spilled pancake syrup under a storage shelf, being eaten alive by the mouse stuck next to it. I have had to edit out the several minutes of gagging and string of expletives that I just uttered after imagining that story. You're welcome, viewers. Did food safety inspection at a large slaughterhouse for a while. We did our own inspections each shift and the government inspector stopped by once a day too. One day I came around a corner and one of the workers who was running service for the butchers had dropped a ham on the floor. So the proper way to handle this was for him to leave it there and call for a re-inspector to come pick it up, take it out to carve off any contaminated bits, and rinse it in boiling water. Now, it relatively often happened meat was dropped on the floor, it's just very, very hard to avoid it when running in a factory setting with human labor. So this was common. What was uncommon was what the guy did. First, he tried catching it as it fell, which would have been fine. No contact with any surface, and he could have just thrown it back into the tub it had fallen out of. He didn't catch it though, it landed on the floor. Thinking that no one was watching, he tried picking it up and dropped it again. He did this 3 times, so first and foremost, he's not supposed to be touching anything that's been on the floor. It cross-contaminates his hands, and he has nowhere to put the contaminated product anyway. But he did this 3 times and dropped it 3 times. Freshly carved hams can be slippery when wearing vinyl gloves. He then, out of pure frustration and annoyance at the unwieldy ham, dropped down on all fours and proceeded to pick up the raw, freshly cut, 6-kilo ham by his teeth. Stood up, ham dangling from his chompers, and dropped it into the tub with around 600 kilos of product, and drove off with the tub for processing. He was fired a few minutes after that, and the entire tub of product was discarded. I followed him and let him park the tub before I did a very cliché type of scene. I wish you'd interrupted him while he had the ham in his mouth. Well, yes and no. Had he picked up the ham by his teeth and carried it to the grinder for disposal, technically he had just packed up contaminated product and had to change his clothes and gloves. Of course, carrying anything in your mouth, whatever it fricking is, doesn't fly. But a straight, no prior warning firing? I'm not so sure. Probably though, that wouldn't have been up to me. But when he put it in with the clean product and drove it off to processing, that shows a complete disregard for any sort of understanding of what you should and should not do when working with food. He had made the decision himself even before I dragged him into the office of the shift director. There was no other option. Not a health inspector, but a Chinese buffet near me was closed down because it got a 0 out of 5 in its inspection. I got food poisoning from there once. The staff just got up and left. Locked the door, never went back. All the food was still out and everything. A week later, a man was walking his dog past said Chinese buffet and heard a loud buzzing noise. Looked through the window to see hundreds of thousands of flies had taken to the building as their new home. Was so bad that Pizza Hut next door had to close too. To anyone asking, this was in Gloucester, England. God damn, get a flamethrower in there. Pools that have absolutely no chlorine. Pedicure tubs filters that have never been changed. All their disinfectants were expired. A restaurant that refused to clean up pest feces or urine and refused to properly reheat foods. The kitchen had exposed wood everywhere. Well, it would be exposed if there wasn't a thick layer of grease and no sanitizer. The pools that have no chlorine things happens all the time. As a former pool manager, I can tell you almost right away too when I get unchlorinated water. Chlorine is volatile and will dissipate quickly, especially when it's sunny out. If you're running an outdoor pool and not constantly monitoring the chlorine concentration and the feeds, it will turn into a pond in about 6 hours. At that point, you're just taking a bath with everyone in your town. Also, really shallow baby pool? You can be almost sure that at least once a day it has no chlorine in it. When you're dealing with less than 1,000 gallons, that thing will vacillate like crazy. Well, thank you for that. If you'll all excuse me, I'll just be busy never swimming again in another pool for the rest of my life. In fact, after reading most of these, maybe I'll just never leave my house. When my son was 5 or so, we had a nanny who used to look after him, and she used to take him to a local pub where one of her friends worked. He got used to sitting at the bar, eating a packet of crisps, and drinking a soda. I'm starting to realize as I recount this, as it doesn't reflect too well on my parenting skills. Oh well, he's 17 now, so I guess it's too late for social service to come and take him away. Anyway, the nanny was great, no matter what you might say. The nanny and her friend were round the corner in the other bar, chatting away, when a couple of besuited gentlemen wandered into the bar. My son was laying a line of crisps along the bar, and one of the gents started talking to him. It's worth noting that the regulars in the bar were used to him being there, and often referred to him as the boss. They let him pour drinks and so on, ostensibly under the supervision of the bar staff. Needless to say, it's illegal for 5-year-olds to be employed as bar staff, even in the UK. "I'm in charge here. Would you like a drink?" offered my son, scooting around the back of the bar. No, it's okay, thanks. What are the crisps for?" "Oh, I'm feeding my friend," my son replied. "Really? Where's your friend?" "He lives in that little hole." My son pointed to a hole in the wall toward the end of the bar. "And sometimes he comes out and I feed him." On cue, a small mouse appeared out of the hole, ran along the bar, and started eating the crisps. The men were environmental health officers. The pub was shut down that week and never reopened. Luckily, they weren't police, otherwise the nanny's friend would have been in serious trouble. This story was pieced together from the report of the nanny and also my son, who thought the whole thing was hilarious. The nanny's friend was quite relieved as she hated the job anyway. My favorite Chinese restaurant got shut down. My ex-wife worked for the city, and I asked her what the deal was. She said the health inspectors found something leaking from the ceiling. They lifted the ceiling tile and shined a flashlight and saw multiple eyes staring back at them. It was chickens. They were raising chickens in the ceiling, and chicken crap was dripping into the food that I had been eating at least once a week. "How do I get out of this chicken crap outfit?" "You secure that crap, Hudson." My dad worked pest control, and after working that job, he can no longer eat Chinese food. He said that nearly every Chinese restaurant he had to work in was disgusting and crawling with roaches. But the one that took the cake was when he had to strip down in the kitchen after a ceiling tile broke and roaches fell into his overalls. My dad did pest control. I went to hang out with him one night, and he took me to a Chinese food restaurant. When we were done eating, he was lingering over his tea, and I was like, "Hey, Dad, looks like they're closing up soon. I think we're keeping the folks from getting done." He's cool and calm. It'll be fine. So we sit. He pays the bill, and we wait. Finally, they're shutting off the lights out front, and I'm losing my mind. I'm horrified, embarrassed, and I'm thinking, these poor people. Finally, Dad stands up and says, "Be right back." He comes back in with his gear. He proceeds to treat the place for their rat problem and the roaches. He gets me to help him carry and move stuff so he can do his job, and doesn't see any problem with this. In conclusion, Pest Control Dad treats a restaurant for nasties right after we eat there. My stepdad used to be a baker in an authentic recreation of an 18th century New French fortress. Because they sell bread to the public, the health inspector came by, and she was ripping into my stepdad for violations like the stonework walls, the doorless entryways, or the lack of mosquito zappers. He pointed out that they were following the highest standards except for things that would destroy the authenticity of his 18th century bakery. The health inspector relented and agreed to give him a pass after verifying the food storage area was secure. They went to the shed, which was a doorless building attached to the bakery. As the health inspector went in, there happened to be an escaped cow licking all the loaves. My stepdad could only say, honestly, this never happens. They passed the health inspection. In conclusion, health inspector witnesses escaped farm animal licking all the bread in a bakery and passes the health inspection anyway. Does your stepdad live in a sitcom? That would explain a lot. Like the laugh track that plays any time he cracks a joke, even if it starts only the two of you in the room. My name is Cow, and when at night, or when the moon is shining bright, and all the men have gone to bed, I stay up late, I lick the bread. My friend was inspecting a restaurant and walked out the back to find a man stirring a huge pot of curry, with his arm. No spoon or anything, just up to his hairy elbows in curry. I'd be more worried about how cold the curry is that he was able to stick his arm in it. Most people in the food industry have insane tolerance to heat. I've not worked in a commercial kitchen for some time, and I can still pick up a pan out of the oven with my fingertips for a brief period of time. Can confirm, people would warn me that something was too hot to touch, and I'd be like, it's cool, I have waitress hands. Or alternatively, fire cannot kill the dragon. I like to think it's more a case of working in the service industry kills your will to live, so you become indifferent to the plates burning your hands. As a man with asbestos hands, I can confirm, coffee machines, kitchens, and hot plates will give you a D&D-style fiendish resistance to fire. However, on the topic of stirring curry with one's own arm, you are likely better off leaving it to tools. Unless you're the following commenters. Is there a different way to stir curry? Well, only if you're really well hung. I had a health inspector tell me this story. There was a family in which both the elderly mother and a handicapped sibling used wheelchairs. Another sibling lived in the house with them and did all the driving, etc. The health department got a phone call from the local wheelchair company. The brother stopped by and picked up a new, custom-built wheelchair for his sister and for his mother, and returned within about 30 minutes, saying that the sister's wheelchair hadn't been made to the right specifications. It was too small. After he left, the staff noticed several roaches on the chair, so the guy got a call. Apparently, it was summer, Midwest, both hot and humid, and the house was all locked up with no open windows for ventilation, curtains drawn, etc. The inspector entered the house and said it was so stifling hot that he started to get dizzy, and he thought hallucinate. He said there was a sound like leaves rustling in the fall, and the walls and floors were kind of vibrating. He then realized it was because they were literally covered in roaches. He immediately evacuated the 3 people living there, and the next day they tented and sprayed the house. He went in a Tyvek suit and knee-high rubber boots, and said that the dead roaches were about 2.5 feet deep in most parts of the house. I work in a bar in Japan that was connected to a bowling alley and an A&W. Mostly Japanese work there. I'm American, and that place was spotless. Every night at 11 when they left there, they were scrubbing everything. I almost stepped on a guy cleaning the baseboards. You could taste the difference in the food because they kept everything so nice. My girlfriend started working in a frozen yogurt shop. The first week, she decided to clean the yogurt machine one night. The entire inside tank was covered in slimy green and brown mold. Oh, and the shop next door was a hoity-toity gym that catered to mirror-gazing health nut gym rats that just loved that low-cal slime mold yogurt. I haven't eaten frozen yogurt since. When I went to culinary school, one of the professors made the statement, "If you want to know how clean a restaurant's kitchen is, go to the bathroom first before you're seated. If the bathroom is dirty, there's a good chance the kitchen is in the same condition." This is what I do when I enter dives. It's a hell of a lot harder to clean a kitchen than a restroom. If you can't do that, you can be damn sure they don't give a frick about the difficult stuff. While this works for restaurants, it does not work for bars or pubs, except at 11 a.m. A pub's restroom goes really filthy about 15 minutes after the drinking starts. There's dirty, and then there's dirty. Superficial, day-old dirt looks quite different from consistent neglect. Not a health inspector, but my mum used to work at this restaurant where the owner just did not give a crap. It was a Mexican restaurant, and my mum told me once that a lady came in asking for caldo de res, a beef soup, but they didn't have any more meat, at least the one that's used for that dish. They were about to let the lady know when the owner stepped up and told the lady that her food would be right out. The server and my mum were both confused as to what she was going to do. Well, this lady goes and literally digs through the fricking trash and pulls out some beef, some still with bone, and then she ran it through water, cooked it, and served it to that poor lady. My mum says the lady was even sucking the bone and she almost felt sick watching. My mum quit that job soon after. After writing this, I asked my mum again about it, and here is what she said. The bone/meat was not raw, it was left over from people who had ordered the same thing. They'd almost run out of that soup, and all the meat was gone, so they thought they couldn't serve anymore. The owner grabbed the bone from the trash, rinsed it and threw it back in what was left of the soup, heated up for a bit, and just served it. Just thought I needed to clarify this. I've worked at places that have gotten 100% on multiple occasions. The inspectors are usually the same few people in smaller areas and get to know people in the restaurants. If you have a good reputation, they come in and check the basics, give you a couple of soft infractions, and move on. If you have something that is a major violation, they will start to, rightfully, nitpick everything. I'm hearing a ton of horror stories and just want to point out something about my experience. I've worked at places the inspectors were easy on because they knew it was clean and had a good reputation. I've worked at one place that ended up having to get a follow-up and quit it soon after. That was the only time I'd seen anything too sketchy. I also worked at a place that regularly got 100% ratings, and let me tell you, we were not 100%. The owner wouldn't do crap to improve conditions either. Mice, several kind of bugs, ceiling literally leaking nasty-ass water, on some areas onto the food prep areas, and once the walk-in cooler broke for an entire 24-hour period, and he said to just keep the food like it didn't happen. If my experience in the restaurant business has told me anything, it's that all restaurants are freaking disgusting. But they won't get you sick most of the time, so if you don't think about it, it'll all be okay. Yep, I've worked in places that honestly were bursting at the seams with unsafe and unsanitary infractions just waiting to happen. Worked in some of them for years and somehow never saw a report on them. I worked as an assistant cook in a restaurant. 2 weeks into the job, I opened a cupboard to get a can of tomato sauce, and I see a huge tarantula scuttling away behind the cans. I told the boss what I'd seen, so that maybe we should get someone to deal with the huge spider living in the kitchen. Boss turns to me and says, "I see you've met Eduardo. Just don't put your hand too close to him, and you'll be good." Later, another cook proceeded to tell me that the spider had been living in there for 2 years, and they allowed it because it kept the rodents and roaches away. This is a true story, so know this. Every time you think about swatting a spider, remember that there's a possibility that a friendly spider is guarding your favorite restaurant's food against nasty critters. The spiders in my house and I have a verbal agreement that is pasted onto every generation of spider that takes up residency in my house. You may remain in my house as long as you don't come upstairs and you keep the ants, flies, and other household bugs that aren't you out of my house. I reserve the right to eliminate you and your webs at will without proper notice. I haven't had an ant in 4 years. I've had a few flies, but they seem to only be upstairs where the spiders aren't allowed. I've killed very few spiders. It's a good arrangement. Not a health inspector, but I've witnessed some things at my first job as a setup waitress at a banquet hall. The head cook had some hairy arms and he always mixed the salad with his hands. So you know that hair is getting in there, and one day we found a used Band-Aid in the salad. I survived the assassination attempt. My stepmother is the lead health inspector for a decent-sized suburban town. While I've never asked what the worst thing she witnessed as part of her job was, I do know that one instance was pretty gross. A truck full of lobsters was traveling down the highway and crashed. The police came and eventually they towed the truck. As a Board of Health inspector, my stepmother was consulted to see if any of the lobsters were viable, and she told them no. The load is a total loss since there were literally lobsters scattered across the highway covered in dirt and sand, etc. Fast forward 24 hours and one of the restaurants in town ran a special, twin lobsters for $19. Apparently the owner of the trucking and towing company knew the restaurant owner pretty well, so they made a deal whereby the restaurant would pay a very discounted price for the road lobsters. The restaurant would turn around and illegally serve the lobsters to unsuspecting customers or sell them out of a truck behind the restaurant. I'm not sure what the repercussions were, but I think they were shut down for like a week. They closed shortly thereafter, and now there's a new restaurant there. The towing company lost their contract to tow vehicles and semi-trucks with the town and the state. It's crazy that they didn't think the health inspector would figure it out. It's their job. Mysteriously cheap lobster after a huge highway crash involving lobsters? I thought that there would be insurance for things like lobster crashes. And now I realize how ridiculous that was as I typed it. Never mind. You aren't covered for lobster crashes on your insurance plan? Weird. Insurance agent here. If you buy lobster crash insurance, we will find a way to not pay anything at all. It was an act of cod. Close enough. Talking 10 years as an inspector. Most dangerous is usually not the most disgusting. I've seen entire walk-in coolers at 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and the staff didn't even notice anything wrong. I've seen piles of mice that died getting stuck in grease behind the fryer. I've seen staff throwing raw burgers within the grill, then making a salad right after with their bare hands. I've seen squirrels and birds roaming freely inside a bread manufacturer. The stereotypes, unfortunately, are true. Chinese restaurants are almost always filthy. The most common critical violation? Dish machine not sanitizing properly. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.